Hey everyone, today we're going to be covering the most requested subject on this channel for Monument of Triumph, and that is of course the 78, that's right if you count 2 and 4 piece bonus separately, there are 78 new set bonuses that Bungie has added to this game. So this video might be 90 minutes long, it might be 2 hours long, I don't know yet. But if you just want the summary, if you just want what I think are the best pairings in the game, skip to one of the last chapters in this video. I'll make chapters later. Just skip to the last one, and there's going to be info on the best pairings for DPS, ammo gen, ad clear, ability builds, all sorts of things over there. Anything that I think might be viable in endgame content specifically is going to be at the end of this video. That being said, I know a lot of you guys are here for like the educational aspect, so if you're just here to hear in-depth testing on every single new set bonus in the game, then stick around. We're going to be making a little tier list. Now, before I get started, I know maybe some of you, this might be the first tier list you've watched from me. This is not going to be like most tier lists you see on YouTube. It's not going to be top heavy. I'm pretty harsh, and the S tier is quite exclusive. And so if you see a set bonus in the C tier, that doesn't mean it's like terrible or a non-starter. It just means it's decent. The C tier is by far the biggest tier in this tier list, and it's for good reason. So let's quickly go over what I mean when I say something is S tier, A tier, etc. So in this tier system, S tier is irreplaceable effects or core kit. Irreplaceable effects is something that is really, really good. Maybe it's a little situational, but the situation comes up fairly often in endgame content, and there's nothing else in the game that provides this effect that is so useful. Core kit means you'd run around with this in neutral content just all the time as your roam build, whether it's like universal DR, great for ammo printing, whatever it is, this is something you'd want in your back pocket pretty much all the time. A tier is situational but very good, or universal with caveats. So situational but very good, this might be maybe only if you're running a melee build, this is really good, but it's insanely strong if you're running a melee build. Universal with caveats means, yeah, it's pretty useful, but it's not as good as some of the S tier stuff. Maybe there's something that's holding it back a little bit, but I could definitely see you using it maybe in certain activities. B tier is stronger in smaller niches or core downgrades. So smaller niches means maybe you specifically have to be using a glaive. So it's an even more niche subsection of the build space that you have to be using in order for this to be very strong, but it's still noteworthy in those cases. And then core downgrades is going to be stuff that's strictly a downgrade from some of the stuff in the S or A tier, and maybe you wouldn't use it because it's a strict downgrade, but maybe it's like an alternative in case you don't have something in the S or A tier. C tier is stuff where it's like, I could see you using it in endgame content, but it's like the bottom of stuff that I would consider viable. So everything up until C tier, S, A, B, C, is all viable in endgame content, but C tier is like you're really starting to push it, all right? Or it's super niche. D tier is it does something in PvE, but basically I don't see a use case for it. It's basically zero use. E tier is quality of life or unnoticeable PvE stats, so basically just reload or handling, or maybe it gives you some super stat, which is like not that useful in endgame PvE, the way most people set up their stats for endgame content. And then F tier is going to be exclusively PvP effects, meaning this literally has no use in PvE whatsoever, objectively speaking. Another thing I'd like to note for this tier list in particular is that there are 2-piece and 4-piece set bonuses that are differently treated. And that's because 2 pieces, well, you can think about a 2-piece set bonus in context and be like, oh, well, this might be weak in one department, but I can fix it by running a different 2-piece set bonus to maybe cover some of the compromises that the first one had. And so 2 pieces are treated a lot more charitably in this tier list compared to 4 pieces. For example, if I'm ranking melee conduction from Pit of Heresy, I need to keep in mind that this forces me to run Regenerative Threshold from the same set bonus family. It's not like I can just run this and then run like a 2-piece of like a different set. And so, yes, this tier list does account for the fact that you are forced to run certain 2-piece set bonuses if you choose to run a 4-piece set bonus. So keep that in mind as we're talking about it. In some of these descriptions here, I will say, oh, this 4-piece is decent, but the 2-piece sucks, right? So it is going to matter in some of these placements, not all of them. Some 4-piece set bonuses are obviously so good that even if the 2-piece set bonus isn't that great, it's still worth talking about. And so we're going to get to that when we get to that. But for now, let's get started on our magical journey of going alphabetically through all 78 set bonuses that are new. I will also be talking about some of the old ones that I've moved up and down since my opinions have changed of them, but we're not going to be talking about them as we go through the first pass. We're going to be going over them when we go over the tier overview toward the end of this video. Let's begin by talking about the Pit of Heresy 2-piece set bonus Regenerative Threshold. The way this one works is that whenever you finish your anything, red bar or orange bar, important distinction because some of these set bonuses require orange bar plus finishers, you're going to store a buff on your HUD that lasts an indefinite amount of time. Whenever you then reach critical HP, so your shields break, red health bar, you're going to get a 20 HP chunk of health and start immediately healing. Now, the problem with this is that, number one, 20 HP is a very small amount. For a chunk healing effect, which you'll see on a bunch of set bonuses today, 20 is not a lot. It's a very unnoticeable amount of health. Number 2 is starting your health regen sounds good in theory, but in practice, you can immediately get health regen interrupted. It basically starts your natural health regeneration, and if you're taking chip damage from enemies, this basically just doesn't do anything, right? There's other set bonuses that also share this effect that I'm going to criticize for the same reason later, and so it's not that strong an effect. Now, there's a benefit here, and that is that this effect is stowed for when you really need it, when you reach critical HP. There's other finisher trigger-based set bonuses that immediately have an effect, and so they're kind of wasted because you might not need the effect at that given moment, and then later when you actually do need it, you're not in the middle of a finisher, right? So if, a finisher requirement also, not the greatest, I would say, in terms of activation condition. I would have liked it to be something easier for an effect that's, this feeble, but it's not the worst. It's not the worst thing ever, and so I put it into the C tier. Next, let's talk about the 4-piece set bonus, Melee Conduction. Now, this is basically a splash damage sort of set bonus. If you see here, any melee hit, unpowered or powered, with a solar buff, so Radiant, Restoration, or Cure, causes a 28 damage, so very low damage for what it's worth, 7-meter radius, 30 to 40 Scorch Explosion on hit, on a 1-second internal cooldown. That cooldown is just there, so you can't just chain these Scorching Explosions non-stop with a splash melee. Now, the only problem with this is that, number 1 is you are forced to run Regenerative Threshold, which means that you can't run any sort of survivability, or let's say, technically Regenerative Threshold does give you some survivability, but you can't run Global DR, like Smoke Jumper, or Ion, or Pharaoh, or SE2Ps. You can't run any of that stuff, right? And so you're forced to have so much offensive output that you're willing to substitute that defensive value that you would get from a standard 2-piece Global DR set bonus. And is it worth it? In my opinion, not really, as you can see in the description here. So I put this into the C tier. Now, I will say, this is probably best on solar subclass melees that already Scorch and would benefit from being able to instantly ignite off of 1 melee. And 1 really comes to mind here. Some people have used this with Celestial Fire, which I think is okay, but it's not as spammable, right? You can get your melee back with Heat Rises, but it's not like you get your melee back. Solar Titan, the best melee, is easily going to be Throwing Hammer, and that doesn't apply Scorch. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about Knife Trick. If you already have torches, it instantly ignites. From what I know, if you have torches and you get Radiant from applying a melee, it doesn't work. You need to already be Radiant when you hit the melee. But for what it's worth, it does make Knife Trick instantly ignite, from what I've been told, which is a nice effect. And in theory, any sort of ignition kill should allow you to get your knife back, because the way Scorch works is assuming the Knife Trick Scorch applies first, any sort of accumulated Scorch on top of that causes an ignition will inherit the base Scorch source, which is coding it as melee damage. So the ignition should also get coded as melee damage, and that will hopefully allow you to get a knife refund a lot more easily. It will increase your kill threshold on enemies in higher level content. But that being said, I don't think, running Solar Hunter with melee conduction or something like that is a game-breaking or game-changing thing. And so because it's so restricted in its application, and because you are limited defensively, again, I'm going to put it into the C tier. It's a little niche. Next up, we have Atheon's Memory 2-piece. And this is from VoG, of course, Radiolaria Breach. The way this one works is whenever you pick up an orb, similar to Regenerative Threshold, you're going to see a HUD buff called Radiolaria Breach. And whenever you reach critical health, it's going to drop these 4 Radiolaria pools around you in a clover pattern. And these pools extend 5 meters in radius away from you. You also get a health buff for 7 seconds. I didn't test exactly how much this health buff is, but that's not a particularly strong survivability effect. And then in terms of being a defensive response, how good is this? Well, in my testing, even in lower light content, these pools barely stagger enemies and they do very, very little damage. So in my opinion, it's kind of decorative and it looks kind of cool when you see your shields break and you see these little pools spit out around you, but it's not really effective overall. Just kind of a surprising visual effect in my opinion, whenever you happen to be running VoG 4-piece, which we're going to talk about next. So in the D tier it goes, technically positive like I mentioned before, but I don't really see any real use case why you would run specifically the 2-piece for the VoG set. Next we have VoG 4-piece, which is going to be Collective Power. This one's a heavy hitter. This one, you have to deal a certain amount of damage. We're unsure whether this is threshold or hit based, but it's not a big amount of damage with any sort of subclass buff active. So this can be Radiant, this can be Restoration, any sort of subclass buff, and you will generate an orb of power at your feet with a 5-second internal cooldown. This is really good because it's kind of hard to find orb generation in this game that doesn't require you to get a kill. So there's some other orb generating set bonuses on this list, but they all require you to get kills. This one is just on damage. And so this is great for getting potentially an extra super during damage, for feeding a still hunt engine during damage, for facilitating hungry Argent mods like Ordnance and Quiver. And it's essentially basically running attrition orbs, but you can run it on everybody without any setup, right? You don't need to run a specific attrition orbs, Ares and ILGL, or a bow or something like that. Everybody has it, and the orbs drop at your feet, which is probably the best place for them to drop instead of them dropping on an enemy or something like that you're shooting. So this is easily in the S tier because of all of the different crafting that it can facilitate. There's plenty of damage phases where maybe you don't want to use Spire 4-piece, which we're going to talk about later, of course, as I'm sure you've heard about that one. This is the obvious go-to if you're not going to use Spire 4-piece for that increase in damage. Next up, we have Circuit, or the SRL set bonus, and we have two of them here. The first one is going to be called Revving Up, the 2-piece set bonus. This one is very complicated. If you're curious about the actual details, I would recommend visiting the Destiny Data Compendium. Just Google that, go to the Gear Perk section, Control F for Revving Up, and read it. It's one of the biggest cells for describing a set bonus that I've ever seen, but the basics is this. If you have movement speed above a certain threshold, which from what I've been told, you can either be on Hunter for that increased mobility, or you need to run a movement mod on your boots, and you can walk. You can walk and strafe, and you'll be above the threshold. But by default, if you don't have any movement mods, and I think if you're on Warlock or Titan, you don't move fast enough to trigger this. So just be aware of that. And it goes up to 10 stacks. The faster you move, so if you like swipe with Eager Edge, for example, the faster your velocity, the faster you gain stacks. And the higher your stacks, the faster you will naturally begin to generate health, and also the faster your health actually generates itself. So you know how when you take damage, there's a pause before your health starts to regenerate if you don't take any chip? Well, this makes that period shorter and also makes your health bar literally go up faster. So it's approximately, I noted here, 1.63 times speed, so 63% faster, and it starts about half a second faster, which I think is like a 33% reduction in duration for that time period, that grace period before you start healing. And so, in my opinion, it takes way too long to stack, and from what I've heard from other people using this as well, it just takes way too long to stack this set bonus through normal gameplay, right? If you're just running around, you're just shooting ads, you stack very slowly, and you lose stacks really quickly. So I haven't really noted how you lose stacks here, but if you ever drop below this movement threshold for over half a second, 0.5 seconds, you immediately start to drain 4 stacks per second, 4 stacks per second, which is a lot, given how that, this is only a 10 stack total set bonus, and it requires you to be moving for a fair amount of time in order to get these stacks. It's just very low uptime, right? So the regen effect is actually pretty decent, but you have to be running around constantly for this to work. And then you also get speed booster if you have max stacks and you are sprinting for 2.5 seconds. I would have liked it a little bit more if you just instantly got speed booster when you have 10 stacks, because obviously you're already moving around a lot. I don't know why they would make you have the amplified effect where you need to sprint for a little bit to get speed booster, but I digress, right? This is just not that good of a set bonus. Technically positive, technically heals you fast, but I'm going to put it in the D tier because I think its uptime is just too poor. Next, we have the 4-piece set bonus from the same family, Dielectric Drift. This set bonus allows you to jolt enemies in front of you whenever you slide with Speed Booster. This is like just the definition of LARP, right? Like, you're not sliding with Speed Booster very often during gameplay. Like, you're not even in Speed Booster when you're in combat a lot of the time, because you can't be in Speed Booster and shoot at the same time unless you shoot for a very short duration of time and go back to sprinting. And then Jolt is not even that good of a subclass effect to apply to enemies. If it was like Weaken or something like that, or maybe like Scorch, maybe it'd be a little bit better, but Jolt is pretty easy to apply to enemies, and it's not that much of a debuff to apply to enemies when you do apply it. So I think tying it to like something that has relatively low uptime, which is speed boost or sliding, is not that great, right? So again, D tier, fairly obvious. Next up, we have an interesting one, which is going to be the CODA set from Prophecy. The 2-piece is called Between Poles, and the way it works is you can kill stuff with light weapons or dark/kinetic weapons, so in your top slot or your energy slot, and then I suppose your power slot can also be either. And it goes up to 5 stacks. I'm not sure how much grenade or melee you get at max stacks. Based on other set bonuses that share a similar property in the 2-piece family, I would assume it's maybe 6 grenade per stack. So maybe it's like 30 grenade for 10 seconds, 30 melee for 10 seconds at max stacks, but it kind of depends. Now, there's only a small problem with this, and that is you can't have both active at the same time. It is polar in nature. So if you get a light weapon kill, you get 5 light weapon kills. The second you get a dark or kinetic weapon kill, you will instantly remove all your light kills and start stacking the dark polarity instead. And so that's kind of a downside. I don't think it's that great. Also, in my opinion, grenade and melee are not that high impact of stats to get off of a set bonus, because usually if you're running a very grenade focused build, you're already running very high grenade, or maybe you'll have one grenade font to make sure that you have high grenade, and getting it off a set bonus, especially one where it's like the second you get a dark kill, you instantly erase all benefit, not really that great. If I was to pick a stat to get from a set bonus, I'd probably much rather have weapons, but that's just me, right? But regardless, I don't think this is that great. You're not really going to notice this in your gameplay for the most part, even if stats are technically positive. So I put it into the D tier. Next up, we have a surprise contender that I was actually notified of fairly recently that I'm very impressed with, to be honest, and that is the 4-piece set bonus from Prophecy called So Very Thin. Now, the way this one works is that it's twofold. You have light weapon kills and dark weapon kills, which give you grenade and melee energy respectively, and the amount of energy is actually quite high. With a light weapon kill, a friend of mine was able to get a third of a firebolt grenade with 100 grenade, which is approximately equal, we think at least, to enhanced demo at the tier 2 level. So for those of you that don't know how the tier 2, tier 1 system works, certain weapons with Demolitionist and Pugilist give more energy than other weapons. And that's specifically shotguns, glaives, snipers, and fusions give you 22% grenade energy when enhanced instead of 11. And so this is approximately, by the way, when we say grenade energy, it kind of depends on the grenade, right? They changed it so all these scalars, chunk scalars, are all variant depending on what grenade you have. So we tested a demo weapon, and it gave us approximately half the amount that a light weapon kill with this set bonus gave for Firebolt grenade. So it was like a sixth, Firebolt gave about a third, okay, with this set bonus. So pretty good, pretty good. That's actually very good for ability gains for one singular kill to give you essentially all of your weapons enhanced demo, enhanced fusion at the shotgun tier is really, really good, right? So this obviously needs like a little bit more testing, but at least I'm fairly confident that the ability regen on this is quite good. Now, the second half of this set bonus is the real kicker, and that is alternating weapon kills. So if you have the light polarity buff, which I believe lasts around 5 seconds, and then you kill something with a dark weapon, you get resist times 3 for 5 seconds. I want to repeat, resist times 3. Resist times 3 is quite a rare effect. It's 40% DR, 40% DR. And when I saw this and I read the description of this set bonus, I thought, oh, okay, maybe you need to get a bunch of alternating weapon kills. Like you need to get light kill, dark kill, light kill, dark kill, light kill, dark kill, and then it gives you the DR. And maybe the DR is not that high. Maybe it doesn't last that long. Or maybe once you get the DR, you have to repeat the cycle again. So you gotta go light, dark, DR, and then you have to kill light, and then you have to kill dark, and then you get the DR. No. This is as good as I think you really could have asked it to be, which is you get a light kill, you get a dark kill, gives you the DR, and then as long as you get a light kill within the dark polarity timer of 5 seconds, you instantly refresh your DR up to max, which is insane. That's really, really good. So the only downside here, I think this is easily, like I say in my comment here, the most consistent source of high DR in the game if you're able to play around swapping polarity. So if you're willing to use 2 different weapons and you swap them fairly frequently, like let's say you're running Mint and Choir, you get a Choir kill, you hang out a little bit, maybe kill a couple more adds with Choir, you swap to your Mint, and then you get a couple kills with Mint, you swap back to Choir. As long as you're willing to actively do this in your head, this is really a lot of DR. 40% is a lot of DR to be getting off of a global set bonus without any special conditions that you can basically just trigger constantly, right? So obviously there's other set bonuses that give you DR for not even getting kills, and those are probably going to be higher uptime in certain encounters compared to this. But if you're kill hungry and you have the ability to swap polarities, this is pretty insane for survivability, not to mention the excellent chunk gains from the just general effect of this set bonus as well. So really good stuff, kind of a pleasant surprise seeing this one. Next up, we have Crota's End. Crota's End, the 2-piece set bonus, basically makes it so any melee kill that you get makes a Cursed Thrall explosion. So if you've seen Cursed Thrall, the origin trait on the Crota's End raid weapons, every time you get a melee kill, your weapon kills for the next certain amount of time will create like a nice, cool, bright green Cursed Thrall explosion. Now, it is less damage than the standard Cursed Thrall explosion. It does 257 damage at +0, which is not like a crazy amount of damage, just like a decent amount of damage. And it does provide like a little bit of stagger. But in my opinion, if you want a melee kill based stagger or like CC or like some sort of splash effect off of a melee kill, there's a much better one, which we're going to talk about shortly, from Deepstone Crypt. Okay? And so as a result, I'm not really going to recommend this one too highly. It is C tier. It's just kind of nice. The explosions are kind of cool. Maybe they help you get some chained combo kills. For example, like let's say you're running Combination Blow Hunter. If you get a Combination Blow kill on an ad, all the ads around it being slightly weaker make them more likely to die to a single Combination Blow punch instead of 2. And so that can make things a little bit more easy for you, but that's obviously a strongly dependent thing, depending on your build, how kill hungry it is, how stack hungry it is, as well as what content you're playing. So I can see this being used maybe somewhere, but it's certainly not as good as the DSC 2-piece, which we've mentioned in the description here, and we're going to talk about later. Next, we have Crota's End 4-piece Power of the Sun. So this one I got a lot of questions about because it needed some testing. The way this works is the exact same as Chaos Reshape's timer structure. So Chaos Reshaped is like Frenzy. If you're in combat for 12 seconds, you get the tier 1 effect. And then if you're in combat for 12 more seconds, so 24 seconds total, you will get the tier 2 effect. The tier 1 effect on Crota's end is 15% DR, and the tier 2 effect is 25% DR. And so if you think about it like Chaos Reshaped, and if you're in an encounter where you're taking a lot of chip damage, this is really easy to keep up. And the condition for ending it is if you are ever out of combat for 7 seconds. So if nothing shoots you and you shoot nothing for 7 seconds, it'll break the loop and require you to be in combat again. So I would say this really depends on the encounter. Some encounters, you are kind of sitting there for a while, and maybe you're going to drop DR, and then you're going to have 12 seconds of essentially just being naked with no DR, which sucks. But there's some encounters where you're taking chip damage constantly. And so this is a really brain off way of, in those encounters, specifically high combat uptime encounters, just guaranteeing that you have a 25% DR all the time. Now, I put it in the A tier because it is super little thinking required, and it's maybe decent with like melee setup because you have the 2-piece Crota like running underneath it. But I will say, you know, there are 2-piece set bonuses that can provide DR as well. A similar amount, like 15 to 25, 20%-ish, that don't require you to give up running your, 2-piece to run a 4-piece. So I think it's not particularly amazing. I think this one's near the bottom of A tier, but it's certainly not bad, right? Given how little thinking it is, it's just basically just like a Frenzy or Chaos Reshape type timer effect. It's really easy to keep up. Next up, we have the new Trial set bonuses. I'm not really going to spend too much time talking about these because they do basically nothing in PvE. Primary Survivor, the 2-piece, Ally Death or Solo, which is an environmental condition instead of a player-focused condition, just gives you handling, reload. I don't know, if you want more reload on your guns when you're solo, you can run this, but like there's other reload effects that don't require you to be solo. So I'm just going to put this in the F tier. And then Primary Phantom, every time you get a kill, you get removed from radar, which I don't think does anything in PvE from what I know. Doesn't make ads like less likely to target you or anything, so does literally nothing in PvE. Next, we have Europa. Now, this is a surprise one. For those of you who are keeping in touch with the meta and like, you have your finger on the pulse, you probably are aware of a lot of these. This one you might not be aware of. Europa 2-piece, I believe this is bugged right now because normally the Europa requirement is you need to be out of combat for 12 seconds, which is a terrible requirement because in most encounters, you are in combat every 12 seconds for sure. You are taking damage or doing damage every 12 seconds, definitely, right? And so normally this would be really bad. However, for some reason, I think this is currently bugged, and at least the 2-piece effect can trigger every 12 seconds just generally. Just generally, even if you're taking damage, even if you're doing damage, every 12 seconds this does trigger. And so what it does is if you get a kill every 12 seconds, you get on that kill an additive 20% ammo progress for both types on your bars. When I say 20%, I'm not saying the amount of ammo gen that a kill would give you gets 20% added to it. I'm saying the bar itself goes up by a 1/5. And so at 0 ammo gen, if you kill something with a weapon, that is equivalent to getting 7 times the ammo progress on that specific kill. If you have 100 ammo gen, it's like 3 to 3.5 times depending on special or power weapon. So that's a lot. And if you do the math, this is essentially equal to doubling your ammo gen if you get around 4 to 5 kills every 12 seconds with a 50 ammo gen weapon. So that's pretty good. If King's Fall gets nuked into the ground, this might be next up on the block for ammo generation if you don't have someone like specifically doing it with like Getaway or something, like the Last Wish 4-piece set. So not bad, not bad. I do assume this is bugged though. I'm going to assume this is bugged. It also gives you a free orb on this kill. So every 12 seconds, you just get a free orb. At the start of the encounter, if you want to immediately make a special finisher or something, you can get a free orb off of your very first kill because you're out of combat at the start of the encounter. And then every 12 seconds, you just get a free additional orb. So this is really good. It's a 2-piece, right? I mean, I was not going to go too far here. I was going to say maybe this would be good as a 4-piece too, but this is really good for a 2-piece. So if Bungie doesn't see this as like a critical game-breaking bug or anything, I can see this replacing King's Fall in people's 2-piece set bonuses because it's just passive. And the best thing is there are some encounters where you're not really killing stuff very often, right? Maybe you're killing stuff every 15 seconds or 12 seconds or 10 seconds. And then maybe you're getting 2 kills every 12 seconds. And then this becomes even more ammo efficient when it comes to generation. This gets less efficient if you're killing more stuff, more efficient if you're killing less stuff. So pretty good, pretty good. Next, we have the 4-piece. Now, unfortunately, the 4-piece, I did test this, and this does not work in combat. It doesn't just give you frost armor in combat every 12 seconds. It would be very good if it did that, obviously, but it doesn't. And so, yeah, this is terrible because you're just unlikely to ever activate this passive requirement in endgame content, especially once you have already started an encounter. I could see some use maybe like at the very beginning of encounter if you want like frost armor for some reason, maybe, but you would have it for like 10 seconds or something, and then it would be gone, right? I mean, I guess frost armor is like stacked, so maybe it'd be like 20, 30 seconds now, but like after that, it's gone, right? So I don't know why you would ever use this. Next, we have Cyberserpent Null's 2-piece set bonus, which is going to be called Adrenal Rush. This makes it so that when you sprint for half a second, you get a reload handling boost, and when you kill stuff, it extends this. So it's basically just a free reload and handling boost. I don't know how much it is, it doesn't seem that significant, but yeah, no strongly tangible PvE impact, E tier, pretty easy placement there. Next up, we have Bountiful Munitions, which is the 4-piece set bonus from the same set, Cyberserpent Null, and kills with this effect active, with Adrenal Rush active, which is, again, fairly easy upkeep. Have interestingly increased ammo progress. Someone in my chat tested this, and I believe they said they got a special break within like 6 kills instead of 9, but it wasn't super scientific or anything, so I don't know if this is additive or if it's like a multiplier or anything like that. And this is apparently increased to a certain amount against Elite Plus or Taken enemies, most likely doubled if I had to guess. Not too bad, not too bad. Probably needs a little bit more testing. The only problem with this is, I guess this is kind of an equivalent to the heavy ammo generation thing that you get from Last Wish 4-piece set bonus, but obviously the Last Wish 2-piece set bonus is a lot better than the Gambit 2-piece set bonus. I don't know, unless you want someone to just be farming special ammo for some reason using this and making it for the entire fire team or something like that, I don't think you would really ever use this, but it kind of depends. This one needs a little bit more testing. I haven't tested this myself, but again, someone from my chat tested it, and it seems to be decent. It seems to be decent. Unfortunately, yeah, you are foregoing like a good 2-piece set bonus to use this, but the effect is, it's not the worst, right? I would say heavy ammo is definitely more valuable, which is why we're going to rank the Last Wish 4-piece a lot higher. But yeah, it exists, you know, it is what it is. It's probably the best special ammo generating set bonus, but that's not super valuable, I suppose. Next up, we have Dark Age from Warlord's Ruin. Similar to Gambit, this is essentially just a handling and reload boost when you get melee or sword hits. These stacks decay one by one. They're called initiative, so taking initiative is the set bonus name, and the stacks are in fact called initiative stacks. And yeah, it's like Adrenal Rush, but more niche activation requirements, so kind of just in the E tier. You would never pick this just on its own for any reason. But it is part of the 4-piece set bonus, which is called Healing Initiative. This was actually really cool. So the way this works is every time you activate your class ability with any stacks of initiative, it makes an 8-second duration healing drone above you. It looks kind of like a fallen mine, sort of, and it deploys 10 to 50 HP pulses every 2 seconds, depending on how many initiative stacks you have. So if you have 5 stacks when you make the drone, each HP pulse will be 50. It'll be 50 HP every 2 seconds for 5 total pulses, or 250 HP max. Now the thing is these healing drones, all of their pulses stack. So if you have an entire fire team running this, you could in theory have a bunch of drones above your head and be kind of unkillable during like sword damage or something like that. The only problem is that it's a little bit LARP, I suppose. It's not that good, you know. It's not particularly mind-blowing, and the uptime is kind of bad. It's only 8 seconds, right? So it's not that great. You need to be having your class ability back every 8 seconds, and you can't even pair this with Sage Protector to get your class ability back. When I was first looking at this, I was like, oh, this would be cool if you could pair it with Sage, and then I realized it's a 4-piece set bonus. And if you could pair it with Sage, you could just shoot out like a caster sword or something at a boss every once in a while. You'd keep up your initiative stacks, you'd get your class ability back really fast, and then you'd be able to deploy this drone above your teammates' heads. Unfortunately, unless your entire team is investing into this and really spamming class abilities and just getting them back very quickly, I don't think this is that good. And there's honestly other 4-piece set bonuses that I think are good or like better for melee range sustain than this that don't require class ability usage. So yeah, I just put it in the C tier. It's like a really cool effect and one of the most unique concepts on this entire list, but I don't think it's that potent in endgame content. Next, we have Duality, 4-piece and 2-piece, which might surprise you. First, we have the 2-piece, which is essentially just Bitter Spite, but in the form of a set bonus. Every time you take damage past a certain threshold, you'll get a stack of Built Bitter, and you get a certain amount of reload per stack until you stow your weapon. And it's up to apparently 50 reload or 0.85 times reload duration, which if we're talking about reload effects, that's pretty good. That's a very high reload stat as well as a very low reload duration scaler. So pretty good stuff there. But yeah, this is just going to be in the E tier because it's just quality of life stats, nothing too crazy, which is the definition of E tier like we mentioned earlier. And then we have Bittersweet, which is the 4-piece set bonus. Now, the interesting thing about this is the damage taken, the stacks of Built Bitter that you get, every time you stow your weapon, it consumes the stacks and heals you based on how many stacks you have. And if you have like 4, 5, 6, around that level of stacks, you will get almost a full heal. You'll almost get a full heal off of every time you stow your weapon. And so there is a clip, maybe I'll try to show it on screen right now, but there's a clip that the data compendium guy sent to me of being an ultimate content with no resist and basically just swapping weapons and permanently healing almost his entire health bar. The way that I and a couple other endgame players that I've talked to perceive this set bonus is basically If you for some reason are unable to get any sort of kills or orbs in a room or in some sort of encounter, and you're taking a lot of chip damage, this could be a really, really good set bonus. And I think it scales into harder content. The harder the content, the less you're getting kills, the less you're getting orbs, the better this set bonus is going to be. And it does really heal you very, very aggressively. So I think it is actually quite an impressive set bonus. I put in the A tier. Initially, I had it at the bottom of S tier. And then I realized that there's a large swath of content where like you probably wouldn't really see the benefit from the set bonus compared to just running standard DR. So definitely quite situational, but can be very, very survivable in the right circumstances. Next, we have the Moon set, aka Dreambane. And first, we're going to talk about the 2-piece set bonus called Nightmarish Power. We talked about another set bonus in the past, I think it was the Prophecy one, where you increase your grenade and melee stat. This is basically the same thing where these are QOL stats. They are of the less noticeable variety as I note down here, but I really don't think you're ever going to notice having 30 grenade and melee, especially if your build is properly kitted for spamming those abilities. And so an elite plus kill, you know, getting an orange bar kill, this 15-second effect is quite long and it being refreshable is nice. So you'll have pretty decent uptime on this depending on what encounter you're playing, but I don't know, requiring an orange bar kill for like basically a noticeable effect, again, that's going to go in the E tier. Next, we have Nightmarish Resilience, which is the 4-piece set bonus from the same Dreambane set. And basically what this does is if you do a certain amount of damage over time through instances, so it's not a damage requirement, but rather a hit count requirement, there's a 0.45 second internal cooldown apparently, so it does take like 3 to 4 seconds to actually pull this off. Yeah, it's almost close to 4 seconds to pull this off. It's not that great, right? So this is, you can just ignore this. Let's focus on the kill aspect. So if you have an orange bar and you've killed it, the next 15 seconds, the next kill that you get will give you 20 HP and begin your health regen. Now, for those of you who are paying attention, this is the exact same effect as the Pit of Heresy 2-piece effect, except for this can trigger constantly as long as you have this 2-second internal cooldown dealt with. So every time you kill an orange bar, every kill after that is going to give you 20 HP and begin your health regen, which is not bad. This is decent sustain. The healing effect cannot be stowed, like I mentioned, and is mostly passive off of just getting killing sprees. Every 2 seconds, you give yourself a little bit of heal, and if you're not taking chip damage, you'll get a little bit of health regen as well. So definitely a little bit survivable, but I don't think you'd ever run this. I put it in the C tier because technically it is like a little positive and has high uptime, but besides that, I don't think you'd really ever run this. So yeah, I'm not going to put it in the D tier because some of the stuff in the D tier just, it really doesn't make sense to pair it with this Moon, 4-piece, but it's definitely not that great either. Next, we have Eutechnology from Arena or Pinnacle Ops. We're going to take a look at the 2-piece set bonus, which is the Gift of the Ley Lines. Now, this requires you to get 3 Void kills within 5 approximately seconds of each, and it'll give you a Void Breach. I'm not sure if this obeys the global Void Breach cooldown thing, if that's a thing, because I vaguely recall the timer not being on my screen when I made this happen, but yeah, unfortunately, Void Breaches are not the most universally valuable elemental pickup type, and the spree requirement, 3 kills, is a little hefty for just the Void Breach, so kind of the risk reward, the input versus output is not that great on this set bonus, but I just gave it a C tier. I mean, it does give you a Void Breach, which is like kind of like Pocket Devour you can keep on the ground, but if you're playing Void and you have Devour off of Echo of Starvation already, like you kind of are already making Void Breaches, and orbs are also like very easy to come by as well. So not really sure why you would go for this. Next, we have Techeun's Foresight. So kill after picking up a Void Breach. If you kill within 7 seconds of picking up the Void Breach, the radius of this explosion is slightly increased to 5 meters instead of 3, and the damage is approximately doubled as well. Unfortunately, yeah, the splash damage and the radius on these explosions is pretty underwhelming. I don't know if you've seen it yourself, but 5 meters even after picking up a Void Breach is pretty bad. And how often are you really picking up Void Breaches in endgame content? The damage is also only 173, which is pretty pathetic when it comes to being like a splash damage effect. Yeah, there's also a long effective cooldown between each explosion because it's only when you pick up Void Breaches, right? So I thought this was pretty fitting for the D tier. Certainly not E tier, right? It's not completely unnoticeable, but D tier I think makes sense for it because I don't know why you would ever take this. Okay, next we have Nessus, which was a pleasant surprise. I think people are kind of catching on to the 4-piece now. I was kind of singing this thing's praises on stream, and I used it in our Pantheon clear, but I would like to talk about it now. So Exodus Down, the 2-piece set bonus is called Emergency Electromagnet, and the way this works is every time you reach critical HP, you will collect all nearby orbs and ammo within approximately 10 meters, and the cool thing about this is that if you pick up multiple orbs at the same time, they will count as simultaneous pickups for repurposed charge. And you'll understand exactly why that's valuable in just a second. Now, unfortunately, this is currently bugged and only works once per life. If you use it once and then you get crit again, you will not be able to activate the effect again. Obviously, this is unintended, and I'm assuming Bungie is going to fix it, and I've placed it in this tier list assuming it is fixed. If it only works once per life, then obviously this is almost a useless effect, and I'd probably move this down to like the D or even the E tier, but obviously this is going to be fixed. Not particularly useful on its own, this emergency electromagnet effect. The logical move here, if you wanted to build into this, is to pair it with stuff like Facet of Purpose or Echo of Starvation or Orb Healing mods like Better Already. It's the obvious pick, but even on its own, even with mod setup, it's not particularly amazing, so I just gave it the C tier. Now, what is pretty good is this 4-piece set bonus from Nessus called Repurpose Charge. Gaining, losing, or spending any amount of armor charge gives you a certain amount of DR for a certain amount of time. And the way that this works is when you pick up 1 armor charge, it gives you 2 stacks of repurpose charge, 2 gives you 3, 3 gives you 4, so it gives you 1 extra stack of repurpose charge for the amount of armor charge that you pick up or spend or lose or whatever at any given moment. So at minimum, if you pick up an orb, you're going to get 13% DR. If you pick up an orb with stacks on stacks, which most people on their roam loadouts, they are running stacks on stacks, you'll have 21% DR. So you basically have permanent 21% DR uptime. And then if you ever go for a special finisher or pick up 2 orbs at once, using emergency electromagnet or powerful attraction, you will get 30% DR, provided you have 3 armor charge, available and you start at 0. And you might be wondering, how long does this DR last? Well, it's 3 seconds per stack, which means that at 1 orb pickup, so 1 armor charge being spent or gained, you will get 6 seconds. For 2, it'll be 9 seconds. And then for 3, so if you special finisher, you get 12 seconds, I believe, if not more. And you also get a small heal. It's like a 5 HP heal, super, super low. Previously, I said that this was bugged and wasn't healing when you gained, lost, or spent armor charge, but I suppose they just made it a very low amount of healing, of almost unnoticeable amount of healing. It also starts your critical health regen, which is pretty cool. So if you're in the red and you pick up an orb or you spend armor charge or something like that, it immediately starts regenerating your health. So this is packed with like 3 different effects that are really, really good. And if you're like, this is basically like Smoke Jumper, except the uptime is way higher and you have to pay by making it a 4-piece instead of a 2-piece. And I think the biggest problem with Smoke Jumper was easily, if you're not running some sort of, firepower or heavy-handed build where you're constantly making your own orbs, the biggest problem with Smoke Jumper was uptime on something like Solar Warlock. If you're not running like an Attrition Orbs SMG, pretty poor uptime. Repurpose Charge fixes all of this, right? Number one, they could have made it a lot worse by just downgrading the DR depending on how much armor charge you spend or gain or lose. But fortunately, they made it so that it keeps the highest amount of stacks that you get. So if you ever special finisher anything or pick up 2 orbs at once using stacks on stacks, you will instantly get 30% DR. This is also refreshable from what I know. Even if you're at max armor charge, as long as you're ticking, if you pick up an extra orb, you will get the timer extension. So that's why I've written this is probably the most consistent build agnostic survivability set bonus in the game. I think it's deserving of that title. I think Nessus 4-piece, if you just want to live and you just don't want to think too much, I think it's maybe one of the best set bonuses in the game for just, playing neutral. Next, we have First Ascent from the Pale Heart. The 2-piece is called Stack 'em Up, and basically it works like honing, right? I think even the timer is basically the same as enhanced honing at 24 seconds. And if you get kills of different elements up to 5 stacks, you will get 5 stacks of Stack 'em Up. And you just get more Transcendence gains, in theory. However, this is currently bugged and gives you no Transcendence gains whatsoever, so it does literally nothing. However, if this does get fixed in the future, I would still put it in the D tier because Transcendence gains, they're nice, but they're not absolutely essential for gameplay. In theory, you could argue that this is like higher uptime on DR because Transcendence gives you 25% DR naturally. But that's kind of pushing it. That's kind of pushing it. And I don't think getting faster Transcendence is like a major selling point. Usually when you're limited on finding Transcendence, it's because you're not doing enough damage of a certain like element type. And this is not going to help you with that because it doesn't say like, when you do light damage, you get dark Transcendence as well, and like an accelerated amount or something. It doesn't say that, right? So that's usually not the problem with Transcendence, so I'm just going to give it a D tier. Also, something I want to note is that anything that's currently bugged, I tried to rank it where I think it's going to end up once it gets fixed, besides KF, which we'll talk about when we get to that. First Ascent Pale Heart 4-piece is going to be called Burn 'em Down. Using your grenade while you're Transcendent gives you 6% grenade energy per Stack 'em Up stack that you consumed. Unfortunately, this only applies once, and you'll need to get more Stack 'em Up stacks after you throw your initial grenade. So if you guys remember, it's basically like Grenade Kickstart or like OG Charged with Light Firepower, and unfortunately, Transcendence grenades are not that strong. None of them are that strong, right? Hunter, you have Prisonade, Warlock, you have Prisonade, Titan, you have Prisonade. None of them are that great. And so using a 4-piece set bonus to get your Transcendence grenade back faster is insane. Especially when Transcendence Grenade already comes back pretty quickly if you use your melee during Transcendence. So really, really weak. I think it's borderline unnoticeable, terrible effect. I put in the E tier. That's how bad it is, I think. Okay, next we have Sunder Doctrine, Flain. Sinew Stitching, 2-piece. The way this works is when you take a certain amount of damage, you will generate a threadling from your body. Unfortunately, from what I was told by someone in my chat, they went to the shooting range and they got shot 12 times by Karl the Colossus before they were able to generate a single threadling. Now, that person could have just been lying, I doubt it, but that's pretty terrible, right? That's a lot of damage taken to generate threadlings. Now, I'm sure, if they made it so any damage taken spawns a threadling, that would be crazy OP, but they could have at least made it less. I think the damage threshold is seemingly very high. And so as a result, I'm going to put that in D tier. And of course, spawning a threadling, there's a lot of artifact support for threadlings in this end of service patch. So not necessarily a bad thing, but one threadling, really, for taking that much damage, yeah, not that big of a fan. 4-piece set bonus knit together. How this works is once you reach critical HP, any threadling hits will heal you for approximately 50 HP per hit. The way I know this is I asked somebody to test this for me. I asked them to get 1 HP and then throw a threadling grenade. And apparently, their threadling grenade healed them to almost full HP from being 1 HP from the laser in the shooting range. So I'm just going to approximate that it's maybe 50 to 60 HP per threadling hit, which this would actually be a really, really good set bonus on threadling builds if it didn't require you to be critical HP. Once you reach critical health, you're already kind of in danger, and the best set bonuses are preventative, right? Especially given that this set bonus does not give you any DR on its own from the 2-piece or from the 4-piece effect, so you want this thing to be keeping you topped up all the time. And so you don't want to be in one-shot range, you don't want to be already critical health, and you don't want to be relying on this healing once you're down there, you want to be keeping yourself topped up. And so it would be a lot better if it didn't require the critical-based healing. On top of that, threadlings have travel time. And so a lot of really good HP responses, survivability responses in this game are instant in nature, and that's what makes them good. Having to wait for your threadlings to attack something, which they're naturally slow traveling projectile-based damage, is not great. Fortunately, this has some good synergy with stuff like Weaver's Call, the 2-piece set bonus, you have Euphony, which generates its own threadlings, Horde Shuttle. Lots of stuff can synergize with this. It's just, unfortunately, I wish the healing was more of a sustained thing and not a critical response thing, especially given the nature of threadling damage. Okay, next up we have the Last Wish set bonus, aka Great Hunt, which is aptly named after the raid mods that you used to be able to slot into this armor pre-patch. So the first one is Taken Barrier. Every time you get a grenade kill, you get 10% DR, non-stackable, you get resist ×1 for 7 seconds, refreshable. Now, unfortunately, the only grenade build in the game right now that can really consistently get grenade kills constantly every 7 seconds is Getaway Artist. And so if you're going to use Getaway Artist and you're using triple firepower, you're going to be making a lot of orbs. And I think you'd rather run a 2-piece that benefits from you generating that many orbs. For example, Smoke Jumper. And there's even other 2-piece set bonuses that just give you more than 10% DR at a similar level of uptime. And so I think you're only really taking this if you're going for the 4-piece for Great Hunt, or if you're using Getaway specifically and you just want resist all the time, which, maybe you find some of the other 2-piece set bonuses to be slightly less consistent, like SE 2-piece, for example, relies on Elite Plus presence, or maybe Smoke Jumper, you don't want to pick up your own orbs for some reason, I don't know. So it's basically like Pharaoh, but it's better uptime for specifically Getaway Warlock, but there are better DR uptime set bonuses, which is why I put this in the B tier. It's consistent DR, but there's better options. Which, if we remember, the B tier, I described it as being core alternatives, which I guess completely makes sense for this. Next, we have Taken Armaments, the 4-piece set bonus. This gives you approximately 3.5 times heavy ammo progress off of specifically grenade kills. Now, this is really good on Getaway. As you would imagine, somebody on Getaway can just sit in front of a door that spawns a lot of ads during an encounter, put on Finders and Scouts, and then you'd have a ton of heavy ammo for your whole team on that specific role. So this is a very specific, hyper-specific niche thing that one person can do for the rest of the fire team. I think it's good for that specifically. But outside of that, outside of Getaway, where you're getting this many grenade kills, I mean, I suppose you could have a hunter grappling to a tangle or a navigator point or something and just repeatedly doing this as well. But I do think Getaway is probably the best option for this. So, I mean, if you need someone to do an ammo printer thing with Scouts, this is an option, but I don't think outside of that, this is really super viable. Next, we have the new Iron Banner set, which nobody has access to right now since Ivy is not out right now, as far as I know, and that's Iron Battalion. So the 2-piece here is called Primary Honing. This is basically just a passive increase to handling and reload for primaries, but it also gives you non-boss damage, an increase based on your weapon stat. So from what I know, based on some of the other stuff that we have, there's a kind of trend here where Bungie has given non-boss damage, maybe specifically to primaries or just non-boss damage in general to a lot of set bonuses, and it's usually around 10%. So for something that's completely passive like this, I would assume it's probably 5 to 10%, which is pretty unnoticeable, right? Pretty unnoticeable. But I do think it's a little step up over the E tier stuff we have that is like genuinely like you would never notice it ever. Whereas like a small damage buff on your primaries against red bars, that's maybe kind of noticeable. It's like an extra little perk, right? So I'll give it a D tier. Next, we have the Iron Banner 4-piece, which is called Super Cyclical. And the way this works is if you get kills in your super, you get a certain amount of super refund per kill. Now, how high this places really depends on how much of a super refund you're going to get. This hasn't been tested yet because I don't think anyone has this set. But in theory, in certain encounters, maybe you're using your well with Phoenix and you're like defending some sort of relay or construct or whatever, and you're by yourself, this could make it so that you have really high super uptime because combined with super refund exotics, maybe you can get 60 or 70% of your super back before you actually are out of your super. So yeah, I mean, could be decent, but you know, it really depends on testing. And unfortunately, the 2-piece does kind of suck in the grand scheme of things. So you are going to have to give up some DR in order to achieve this kind of specialist role, which is why I decided to put this in the C tier. Okay, next up we have Kentarch 3, or the Garden of Salvation set bonus family. We're going to be talking about the 2-piece first, so Network Admin. The trigger for this is just being near one of your friends. Or there's also another trigger, which, you know, being near another person with this set bonus on. And that just gives you health stat, which is not super relevant. Being near your friends just gives you handling and reload. So this is essentially just like Ensemble, the perk. Again, generally unnoticeable, just quality of life stats, just handling, reload. So I'm going to give it E tier. The 4-piece set bonus is a little better, I suppose, in its raw effect. It basically just gives you Pugilist that you can share with your friends. If you get weapon kills and you're near your friends, they just get some melee energy back, and it's approximately equivalent to tier 1 Pugilist. So it's not like the Prophecy 4-piece where every single kill gives you tier 2 Pugilist or Demolitionist. It's tier 1, so it's like 11% or whatever. Whatever you want to consider it, depending on the chunk scaler. So I just gave it a D tier. Okay, next up we have Legacy's Oath, aka the DSC set bonus family, and that's going to be Augmented Servos coming up first as the 2-piece set bonus. The powered melee kill trigger, generally pretty easy to activate on a lot of melee spam builds, creates a 9-meter disorienting pulse. This is really good. This is probably the best melee-based set bonus in the game. Think about like Combination Blow, Tempest Strike, Knockout Punches, Roaring Flames Punches, Throwing Hammers. There's tons of melee builds that would really, really benefit from this. And 9 meters is a fairly decent spread. So anything that's not like a splashy melee, as soon as you get a kill, everything around you is going to be blinded for around 5 seconds. So it's effective DR because everything around you is just not shooting. And it's constantly reproccable. So I think this is a really, really good survivability-based set bonus for melee. If it wasn't restricted to melee builds, I'd probably move it up a tier. But because it is strictly kind of only good on melee builds, and melee builds are inherently a little niche, I decided to give it a high A tier. Next, we have Godlike Judgment, which is the DSC 4-piece. A lot of people saw this, the description, and were like, yo, this sounds really cool. Every time you're crit or you cast your super, you get a heat-seeking missile array, which is crazy, right? Isn't it? But unfortunately, yeah, this missile array does 570 damage total. Doesn't seem to have an internal cooldown, but 570 damage total, which is the same amount of damage as a single adaptive sniper shot. So that is very little damage. The missiles can stagger enemies like a little bit, but they don't really do a very good job. In my opinion, you would never, ever, ever take this over Vogue 4-piece, or you would never take this over Spire 4-piece for any sort of damage phase. So the super casting is completely irrelevant in my opinion. However, the critical health aspect, I could maybe see it, right? Because like you can repeatedly trigger this every time you hit critical health. And the only problem with this is similar to how I criticized the Sunder Doctrine 4-piece. The missile array just takes a while, right? It's kind of like ancillary ordnance. The missiles kind of come out behind you and they have a little seeking effect like Eyes of Tomorrow rockets, and then they hit their target. So if they were a little bit faster and a little bit more lethal, maybe we'd be talking here, but yeah, it's not really that great. I really think you would take, you know, DSC 2-piece and just a different 2-piece instead of running 4-piece, even on a melee build where you're at risk of going critical from time to time. So yeah, C tier, I think it's better than some of the D tier stuff, because technically, I mean, it is not the worst thing ever, but definitely a very disappointing amount of damage from this missile array. Next, we have Luminopotent from Solo or Fireteam Ops. The 2-piece is called Ionic Overclock, and basically just gives you eddy current, right? When you're amplified, you get handling, reload, and vent speed for specifically fusions, linears, and heat weapons. That's a pretty restrictive subset of weapons, and so I'm not the biggest fan. Also, it is just handling and reload, so we're just going to give it the E tier and move on, nothing too crazy. And then the 4-piece, I know a lot of people have been singing this set bonus's praises. Unfortunately, you know, you do have to give up DR or sustain, but any jolt or jolted kills make ionic traces, and I believe there's not really an internal cooldown, or it's short enough that you don't really notice it when you're playing. This is really good, right? Anytime you're running some sort of ionic trace build, so you're running maybe like Arc Warlock is the most popular one. This is like the Arc Warlock set bonus. Really, really good. Ionic traces, just everywhere. And I'm pretty sure they're independently generated from other sources as well. So you can have a ton of ionic traces from this set bonus. Unfortunately, if we're talking, big picture, there's not a lot of meta builds right now that can really abuse this set bonus. And on top of that, even on those meta builds, like even if you're playing Verity Arc Warlock with like, Ionic Sentry and Electrostatic Mind or whatever you're playing with Arc Souls, maybe you're not really going to benefit from this, I would say, as much as you're going to benefit from other DR based set bonuses. Just in general, right? Like you would rather, a lot of these builds already have very high ability uptime. So Ionic Traces, they're not going to really do too much for you. And you'd probably rather just have DR. So you're less likely to get one shot when you're playing these builds. Because a lot of these builds, don't have natural DR outside of like Amplified too. Okay, next we have Nezarec's Nightmare. This one was a very popular one. I got this one brought up to me a lot when we were talking about set bonuses initially. I think the hype is dying down a little bit, and I'll explain why. So this is the Root of Nightmares set bonus family. The 2-piece is called Bad Dreams. Every 3 subclass debuff kills that you get, apparently no internal cooldown or rank requirement, they just give you an orb. So if you're running any sort of build that debuffs enemies near you, whether it's like Ascension or Hellion or whatever, this is just a good way of getting free orbs every time you get 3 kills. And the fact that it has basically no internal cooldown is good, right? It's just free orbs, right? And that's fine. Not super noticeable, right? Like I said, not amazing or particularly noticeable. You're just making more orbs. And you'd probably rather take other 2 pieces over this that are more impactful or survivable, but not the worst thing to pair, for example, if you're forced to run it in the case of running Dream Devour, which is the 4-piece set bonus. Now, the 4-piece set bonus, the thing that people have been so hyped about is that it allows you to get Devour on non-Devour subclasses by finishing an orange bar. Now, the problem with this is twofold. Number one is on subclasses that already get Devour, you might say, oh, this is a way of getting free 20% DR all the time because I have Devour already, and it's really easy for me to get it and reproc it. Now, the problem with this is that there are set bonuses that give you 20% DR without even being a 4-piece, right? You can use SC, you can use Smoke, and you can get easily 20% or higher average DR during an encounter and not even use your 4-piece for it, and then just run Devour anyway. The second thing is that if you're not running Devour, there's a couple conditions. Number one, it's not that easy to consistently get orange bar finishers in 6-man content, right? There's a lot of times where maybe you're killing ads on your own and maybe you have control over the situation, but a lot of the time, your teammates are killing these ads, they're shooting ads while you're trying to get a finisher, or maybe an orange bar will spawn behind a bunch of enemies and you don't have Devour until you go finisher it, right? So essentially you're running around with no neutrally positive set bonuses until you get that finisher, and maybe you need to like dive into the back line of an enemy spawn in order to get that finisher to actually have your set bonus do something. On top of that, the subclasses where this is most useful don't have enhanced Devour, so you don't have that extended duration from like Echo of Persistence, meaning that you're more likely to run out of Devour and then need another orange bar finisher. So I think where this set bonus really shines is really going to be solos, because solos, there's a lot of the time where you have a subclass, like for example, Prismatic Hunter, that would really benefit from getting Devour and is able to keep it up because all of the ad spawns in the encounter are all yours, so you can kill them at whatever tempo you want to keep your Devour, and it's very easy to get a finisher because the entire situation is under your control. I think it's very game warping in that aspect. However, in 6-man endgame content, which is mostly what this list is tailored to, I don't think this is that good outside of maybe some specific scenarios on some specific builds where you have access maybe in a certain room, an orange bar spawns right away, and maybe you're alone in that room completely, and your build would really benefit from Devour because it's very focused on DR like Prismatic Hunter. So I know that was a long rant, but I hope you guys kind of understand why Dream Devour is not in the S tier. I think it's a little niche, and I think generally speaking, you would probably rather have other healing effects or other just stronger DR effects that are available in the S tier. Okay, next we have King's Fall. King's Fall. Now, unfortunately, I do believe that this 2-piece set bonus is getting nuked. Iron sharpens iron in the next reset update. I don't know how much it's getting nuked, so it's definitely going to drop from S tier. I'll tell you that much. But I don't know how much it's getting nuked. Right now, what it does is any Elite Plus skill gives you 2 to 8 times or 3 to 6 times special and heavy ammo progress. And I'm sure you've seen in Pantheon, there's a lot of orange bars. And there's a lot of clips going around on Twitter of people just entering a room and it's just filled with bricks from their teammates because everybody is using King's Fall armor with scouts. So it's currently bugged and producing probably a lot more ammo than intended. I don't know where it's going to rank post-patch. And so because I don't know, I haven't like tentatively ranked it anywhere. It could be A tier, it could be B, it could be C, it could be D if they drop it enough, right? So yeah, we'll see what happens with this King's Fall set bonus, but for now, it is the best set bonus in the game, just because ammo in general is in its own way a sort of DR, because if you have access to infinite heavy ammo, you could just spam heavy ammo, which is what a lot of people are doing in encounters with this set bonus. You can just spam heavy ammo and just kill everything. A lot of the time, you're saving your heavy ammo in encounters for damage. If you can just start on galley and galley everything, you're probably not going to die. You're probably not going to die, right? Like everything's going to be dead. So if you just galley everything and then swap to your like damage loadout and just pick up bricks and be happy with that, then a lot of danger in encounters can be avoided. And so it's kind of obvious why they're going to patch this. Next up, we have King's Fall 4-piece set bonus. Now, this is also contingent on the 2-piece set bonus being good. If the 2-piece set bonus drops out of viability, you'll see this drop from the S tier as well, because obviously this locks you out of using other 2-piece set bonuses. Now, Ascendant Escape, the 4-piece, works like this. Every time you get an orange bar kill, you get Ascendant Escape on your screen for an indefinite period, right? It's infinite. It doesn't matter when you get critical HP, but the next time you get critical HP, your shields break after this kill. You'll get invisibility for 6 to 8 seconds, depending on whether you have persistence or not on a void subclass, and there's no internal cooldown, which, depending on how you play this game, you might think that's really strong, you might not think that's really strong. From what I've been told, on subclasses without access to invisibility naturally, this is a very, very strong effect. DR and, a damage avoidance, it's only good when you need it, right? And basically having add projectile tracking completely break on you instantly the second you get to critical HP is essentially like a very high amount of effective DR when you actually need it. And I don't think most people go to critical HP more than once every time they kill an orange bar in an encounter. So I think this is an excellent, excellent escape tool. Literally, it's called Ascendant Escape, an escape tool in harder PvE content. However, I do think, if the 2-piece becomes a lot worse, I don't think you would necessarily run this. This is kind of like a cherry on top thing, on top of an already good 2-piece. If the KF 2-piece becomes like borderline unusable, I don't think this is going to be S tier anymore, like I mentioned. Next, we have the Pantheon set bonus. I think some people were hyping this up. I don't really think it's that good. The 2-piece, it gives you armor charge when you get ammo pickup, and this works with stacks on stacks. It's called Well Prepared, and it gives you 10 health per stack of armor charge that you have. Obviously, in most content, you're just going to be running 3 armor charge, and you're not going to be running 6 with like charged up, and so you're only going to get 30 health max off this, which is like fairly irrelevant in my opinion. Yeah, fairly niche. I would say maybe might help in encounters where, you're not really getting siphon armor charge, but you are getting bricks off of just natural ammo gen. So I don't know, it's kind of okay in that regard. I think this is going to find more use in solos where you're like shoot saluting bricks to guarantee you have armor charge during damage, or when you're like going for your ammo pickup phase, you're not worried about orbs anymore, you're just worried about picking up ammo, which we'll talk about when we reach the end of this video. But for now, yeah, I don't think generally speaking, Pantheos Resplendent, the 2-piece at least, is very good. Now, the 4-piece is actually a little worse in my opinion. This is called Down the Line. And the way this works, it's basically like reverse redirection. Every time you damage, so it's any amount of damage, you could tickle them really. Anytime you damage a mini boss plus enemy, so a boss or a mini boss, you will get 1 stack, and then there's a 1-second internal cooldown. So you need to do 10 ticks of damage to mini boss plus enemies over the course of 10 seconds spaced out. And then the next time you do damage to a red bar or an orange bar, you'll get a 15% damage increase. And a stack will get removed every time you kill an ad. It'll be 2 stacks if it's an orange bar and 1 stack if it's a red bar. However, I've been told that if you use like a splash weapon, there's a small window where you can't lose stacks. So if you like shoot a rocket at some red bars, for example, you'll probably only consume maybe 1 or 2 stacks instead of consuming like 4 or 5 or how many ads you killed simultaneously. Now, unfortunately, 15% is on red bars is not a lot, right? It's like not really noticeable for the most part. And the fact that you have to damage mini bosses first to then do damage to red bars and orange bars doesn't really make sense. Usually you want damage buffs against bulkier targets, because if you have a rocket pulse and you're just shooting red bars and orange bars, they die pretty fast anyways. It's usually like 1 or 2 shots. This is not going to change thresholds for most enemies. You'd much rather have it so that if you kill red bars, you can do more damage to, yellow bars or orange bars, but that's not the case. And so I really don't think there's much use for this in PvE. I'm going to put in the D tier because, the D tier is basically where I said, I don't really see any real use for this. And it forces you to use the Pantheon 2-piece, which is, again, not that strong of a 2-piece set bonus. Doesn't give you DR, doesn't give you like that much survivability either. Next, we have the Per Audacia Crucible 2-piece set bonus. I believe this comes from Comp. This basically just gives you like quality of life buffs, right? Like primary chain, 2-piece. Primary kill gives you handling until you die, which is like, I guess. Sublime Transit, the 4-piece set bonus here, gives you the T-Steps effect, but passively. This should stack with one other movement boost, so you can either run a lightweight weapon like a mountaintop or something, or you can actually just run it with T-steps or stompies, or I think like dunes. These all just stack together, but you can only stack 2 of them total to get like the maximum movement that you can get. So I can see people using this in speedrunning because like there's no other set bonus that you would use in like a transition or skip besides maybe blade focus in some niche scenarios. So yeah, I could see speedrunners using this, but outside of that, not really relevant for PvE. Next up, we have the SE 2-piece and 4-piece set bonuses. Promise. The first one is going to be called Stable Resonance, which is also the name of the buff that you get whenever you kill an orange bar. For 12 seconds, you get 25% extra DR and 7%, I believe it's universal, not even non-boss, just universal damage. So this is excellent global DR for a 2-piece. 25% DR, and it's stackable as well. This is a custom DR buff called Stable Resonance. This is not called Resist ×2. So yeah, this is an excellent amount of DR to get from just a 2-piece set bonus. And in encounters where you have a lot of orange bars, this is constantly up. 12 seconds is like a pretty decent amount of time. And I honestly, when I was ranking this, didn't even think about the damage boost. So the damage boost is not significant for sure, but it's there, right? It's like a free amount of damage that you can use to dump into the next Colossus that appears on your screen, a Callus or something. So why not, right? So yeah, easily S tier. For being a 2-piece, very, very high value for sure. Just dependent on whether or not there's a lot of Elite Plus presence in your encounter, which in a lot of them, there are. So pretty good. Next up, we have SE 4-piece or Resonance Redirection. This one, after you do a certain amount of damage, I believe it's not hit-based or mag-based. I think it's just a certain amount of weapon damage from my kind of limited testing that I did with this. Upon meeting this damage threshold, I think it's approximately 600 weapon damage at +0. You create this 8-meter exhausting explosion with a small internal cooldown. Basically, I was shooting ads, I think with Choir, and every other kill I would get this exhausting explosion. So 8 meters is not super wide, I suppose, and also exhaust is currently bugged right now to not reduce outgoing combatant damage. So that's kind of unfortunate, but I assume that's going to get fixed. If I'm not mistaken, Compendium has told me that it's bugged right now. But if it does get fixed, I think this is actually not a bad effect. And especially if you're playing at like a longer range, just exhausting all the enemies that you're shooting constantly is pretty good. It's not bad. You could think of it as like a Balestra sort of set bonus, but it's a little less niche than that. So I'm going to give it a B tier, especially given that it has a pretty solid 2-piece underneath it. A lot of decent 4-pieces are held back by having a non-DR 2-piece, but you can't say that for SE, and that's why I'm giving this a B tier. Next up, we have Vow, or Resonant Fury. The 2-piece is going to be called a Resonant Plating. Unfortunately, this is another starts health regen effect like the one I mentioned at the very start when we were talking about Pit, where taking mini-boss plus melee damage starts your health regen. Unfortunately, a lot of melee bosses or mini-boss scenarios, first of all, you shouldn't really be in melee range of a mini-boss plus in most content, unless you're doing maybe like sword damage. And maybe if you're doing sword damage like Crota or something, starting your health regen is fine. But a lot of the time, you're taking a lot of chip damage when you're doing sword or melee damage. And so starting your health regen, maybe it's like some effective healing, but it's going to be interrupted pretty quickly. And so, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan. On top of the fact that this has to be mini boss plus, it's not just like red bar or elite melee damage. Can't just apply to any sort of melee build. And for being a 2-piece, I'd much rather have other set bonuses, regardless of whether you're doing a melee build or whether you're doing sword damage. There's other stuff that's better than this. So I decided to place this into the D tier. Next, we have Siphoning Touch, the 4-piece for Vow. The way this works is it's mag-based, okay? So weapon hits or glaive melee hits go up to 5 stacks. And if you use a weapon with a low mag size, for example, a bow or like a rocket with wolf packs, or maybe like a breach GL with some sort of multi-hit effect, then you switch weapons, you'll consume your stacks to gain up to 120 HP if you had 5 stacks. Now, if you're doing some sort of rocket rotation with like Izzy or Icebreaker or whatever, like you're constantly switching weapons, you'll be able to proc this very quickly and basically receive constant healing. If you want to know what I'm talking about, go put on Galahorn and shoot an enemy, or a Pack Hunter Rocket, shoot an enemy with this set bonus on, you'll instantly see your stacks go up to 5. And if you're constantly swapping weapons by doing some sort of Envious rotation, then you'll get healing pretty constantly. However, I think this is kind of just worse than Duality, right? Duality is based on damage dealt to you rather than, you getting hits on enemies. But it's kind of like when you need it, and also is not based on a specific weapon or getting weapon hits or anything like that. So in theory, with Duality, what you could do is you could just shoot an enemy with a weapon, and then when you see yourself getting low, manually switch weapons intentionally in order to trigger the healing effect. With this, you're incentivized to use certain weapon types. It's just more restrictive, right? With Duality, you can also just wait it out and get a much bigger heal whenever you need it, essentially full HP, as long as you don't stow your weapon. I think for a switch weapon to heal effect, I think Duality is just universally better. Next up, we have the Reverie Dawn set, or Dreaming City. Initially, I had the 2-piece for this Dreaming City set ranked a little low because while it is very easy to activate, you just need to take around 55 damage within 4 seconds, which is very easy to have happen in endgame content. You get an amplified-esque effect where enemies just have lower accuracy against you. They just start like shooting walls and stuff. And you get a little bit of reload and flinch resistance. Like, who cares about that? But the main problem I had with this is it's not bad, right? On subclasses without amplify, this is a great way of having a decent amount of de-aggro uptime. The only problem is you don't have this effect for about half the time while you're playing, because the effect lasts 7 seconds. And then after that timer is up, there's a 5-second internal cooldown, which sucks a lot. Okay. Now, however, someone pointed out to me that during solo DPS phases, where maybe you don't have someone like a teammate to amplify you during damage, or you don't have a well, thinking like solo explicator on like certain subclasses. I think you might know who is a fan of this set bonus, now that I mentioned that actually. But maybe like you're on a solo explicator plate and you haven't had the effect trigger and you just want the boss to be less accurate against you after you take some chip damage. This could be useful for that. And I was looking at the C tier 2 pieces. I was looking at the B tier 2 pieces. I think this does fit toward the lower end of B tier. And so I'm not necessarily against putting it in B tier. I just want to give you a little kind of asterisk here, a little side note that this is probably not that good in 6-man content. And it's a little niche, but I think it does have some use, maybe kind of like the Pantheos 2-piece set bonus. So it has some use in maybe solo content, and I'll give it some props for that. But I don't think, even though it can give amplified-esque effects to like Solar Warlock, for example, I don't think it's that good. I think you would definitely take other set bonuses, especially in 6-man content. Next, we have a Wish Fulfilled, which basically ties into the 2-piece, where if you have this 2-piece effect active, the Protective Wish, and you have that 7-second timer going on, the second that 7-second timer runs out, you get Cure ×1, which is 50 HP. That's not a lot. That's not a lot for how often this activates. This is essentially, this can activate once every 12 seconds. If you get a kill, it automatically activates. But if you think about it compared to Heal Clip is very good, and it procs on every single kill, and it's Cure ×2. It's double the healing. This is Cure ×1, and it can only be activated, let's say, at a minimum of every 5 seconds, right? So if you think about it, it's like a 4-piece set bonus that essentially acts a little bit like Bushido, except for it's like less controllable. I would say it's kind of like less controllable. And it forces you to use 4-piece as well. I can see why there's an internal cooldown, because otherwise you could constantly trigger Cure off of just a set bonus. But I do think that if they just lower the internal cooldown a little bit, I'd be willing to rank this a little high. 5 seconds is a long time, given that the effect lasts 7 seconds, and that you're unlikely to trigger the effect immediately after the internal cooldown is over. So it's more likely going to be like half-half that this is active. And an effect can be good, but if it's only active 50% of the time, it's not going to be great. Okay, next up we have another popular one. This one is the Cosmodrome set, or the 7th Seraph set bonus family. And we're going to be talking about the 2-piece first, called Rasputin's Wrath. This is essentially just a stat boost, right? Any sort of AoE kill. By the way, when I say AoE, Rocket Pulse kills count, Rocket kills count, Grenade Launcher kills count, Rocket Sidearm kills count. So all the meta weapons that people are generally using will stack this very, very easily, which is a good thing for the 4-piece set bonus. For the 2-piece set bonus, you get up to 30 weapons and 30 grenades for 10 seconds, which is like, those are probably the 2 best stats to ever have as a passive benefit, but they're still not that noticeable, right? So I saved it from the E tier. E tier is like genuinely unnoticeable. And I put it in the D tier because I do think getting like 30 weapons is basically like a replacement for a weapons font on your boots. So that can be kind of nice, especially if you're running higher stats in like, melee or something like that, because you're running an ability spam build and you don't have as much weapons. This can be kind of useful. Now, the 4-piece set bonus is the one that people are really hyped about. And any sort of Elite Plus or Construct kill or Tangle Destruction, when you have any stacks of Warmind charges, it doesn't scale with the amount that you have. So any stacks at all, which is basically all the time if you're just playing the game normally, will create an explosion that does 216 if it's a Construct kill or a Tangle Destruction, or 405, approximately double damage, if it's an Orange Bar plus kill. It's a 10-meter solar explosion, which is much better in comparison compared to the Eutechnology set. Remember, we talked about that one where you pick up a Void Breach and you get a kill. That was 5 meters, right? This is 10 meters, much bigger, and it also heals you for 25 or 50 HP. It's approximately 25, it's not exact. But again, depending on whether you destroy a construct or whether you kill an orange bar. Now, this has an under 1 second internal cooldown. The reason why the cooldown exists is so you can't just like break a bunch of stasis crystals at the same time or kill a bunch of orange bars with the same ability and get a bunch of explosions, right? These explosions also don't chain. So if one reprisal explosion blows up and kills another enemy, that's not going to also cause an explosion. Now, this is probably the best purely splash focused set bonus The only problem is that obviously this is limited to orange bars, and if you're going to limit a set bonus to orange bars, there are arguably better effects that are more consistent in play if you are wanting to abuse specifically orange bars for finishers or for killing them or whatever. There's probably better set bonuses. And second, if you don't want to use Elite Plus kills and you want to use like the construct part, yeah, you can use this with high uptime on crystal spam builds. Like for example, Stasis Titan, famous for being very good at spamming crystals. You'll just, have a lot of healing, a lot of sustain from breaking your own crystals. Unfortunately, I think that's kind of where the buck stops though. There are not really any really strong meta builds that would benefit very strongly from this build in my opinion. And of course, I mean, you do have sustain from, the construct destruction thing, but you don't really have any DR, you don't have any sort of de-aggro, you don't have any sort of effect like that is a consistency focused effect outside of this ability to heal off of crystals in some way. So I think it's like a feel-good effect, and I think the splash damage is actually pretty cool, but I don't think it's going to be escaping C tier just because of how niche it is. Next, we have Spacewalk, which is the Vespers Host set bonus family. The two-piece is called Augmented Armament. And the way this works is that if you're dealing with a blinded enemy, you will do 15% more primary damage to them. Now, I can see why they limited this damage boost to just primaries, because if specials and heavies were allowed, then this would become like the boss damage meta, having someone disorient an enemy repeatedly while everyone else just gets a 15% free damage boost. But because it's limited to primaries, this is really bad. You're essentially just using this during regular combat if you're using a primary at all. And if you're using a primary, generally you're going to kill something before blinding it becomes worth it, right? Like spending your kit's utility to blind something to then do 15% more damage to it, you'd probably be better off just shooting the thing. So, I mean, this is intended to be paired with stuff like, I don't know, the DSC 2-piece, or with stuff like the Vesper 4-piece, which we'll talk about in a second. But even in those situations, it's 15% primary damage. Like, that's just not really a worthwhile payoff at all. So while this is technically positive and noticeable, I'm going to put it near the bottom of D tier. Next, we have the Vesper 4-piece, which I just mentioned. Every time you throw a grenade, you will get a disorienting pulse before the detonation. Now, if it was every time you did grenade damage, there was a disorienting pulse with some sort of internal cooldown, this would be really, 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 really cool on Getaway or other like grenade spam builds. Unfortunately, it's only on grenade cast. And because it's only on grenade cast, it's a little unfortunate because there's a lot of effects from set bonuses that create disorienting pulses or blasts, and they are kind of worthwhile because otherwise those enemies might be shooting you. Grenades, if you're using them on enemies, they tend to stagger the enemies and just like kill them. Like you expect the enemies to just die. And so this disorienting pulse is not that strong in my opinion. Relatively weak subclass effect tied to a very long cooldown, as I mentioned in the description. Also, you are giving up running a good 2-piece because the 2-piece kind of just sucks. So yeah, that's going to be in the D tier. Next up, we have Ghosts of the Deep, or the Taken King set bonus family. And we're going to be talking about the 2-piece, which is called the Ceremony. Now, the way this works is every time you finish or something or revive an ally, you get the Ceremony effect for 30 seconds. That's a very, very long time, probably the single longest buff you can get from a set bonus, but it only gives you 30 super. And generally, while you're running, people just run 100 super, and any super above that is useless. I mean, you could intentionally tank the 70 super to run this 2-piece set bonus and finish or something every 30 seconds so you get this, minor benefit. But you're never, ever, ever going to notice 30 super during mechanics unless you've intentionally sabotaged your loadout to go below 100 super or go very low in super stat. And then you're like, wow, this set bonus is helping me get my super back for the next damage phase. It's just like, no, it's not. So yeah, not a very useful set bonus to have, basically unnoticeable in the E tier. However, the 4-piece is a little bit better. The 4-piece, the way that it works is every time you pick up an orb, so you finish something once, and then every time you pick up an orb, you'll get your Ceremony extended back up to 30 seconds. Which means you basically only need to finish something once and you'll have Ceremony completely just all the time, right? Which is not that great because like, who cares about the 30 super? But having Ceremony active, I believe you need Ceremony active for this to work. Every 2 ability kills that you get will spawn an Arc Moth, a blinding Arc Moth, which will track enemies within 60 meters, which is quite far, and it will do so for 8 seconds. It has a lifetime of 8 seconds. This is okay, I suppose. Like maybe you could run this on Getaway, and every 2 kills that your Arc Soul gets, you'll get a free Arc Tracking Moth. I've been told that this has basically no internal cooldown as well. Unfortunately, there are a lot of set bonuses that are either 2-piece or only require 1 ability kill and are a little bit more lethal than a tracking Arc Blinding Moth. So the Moth is kind of nice. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some example somewhere of someone spawning in a Moth and it like blinds the next ad wave that spawns. Like, whoa, this is really cool. Unfortunately, this seems a lot more like a decorative effect, even though the internal cooldown is low, because Moths, they just aren't, a lot of de-aggro and CC effects in this game that are very strong. They're strong because they're lethal and instant. an Arc Blinding Moth is going to take a little while to track to enemies and reach them, and by the time it does, you're probably dealing with them already in some other form. So I don't think in practice this Loosen Swarm effect is that strong, on top of course, basically forcing you to use a useless 2-piece. Next up, we have the Shattered Throne 2-piece set bonus, which is going to be called Queen's Foil Rush. This is another example of a finisher trigger effect, and this basically just makes you unkillable during your finisher. You get a 200 approximately HP overshield during your finisher, and makes a 7-meter slowing burst around you after your finisher. So, not a bad effect, right? Unfortunately, this overshield only lasts during your finisher, and you can kind of just use Proximity Ward if you want an overshield during your finisher. Also, you naturally get DR during a finisher anyway, so like, I don't know, you're not really dying during finishers most of the time in endgame content. I think most people can attest to that fact. So this is not a super helpful thing. I mean, it's like, maybe it incentivizes you to finisher things more, but it's not that great. I mean, the slowing effect is decent, but yeah, it's already generally quite safe during a finisher, like I say in the description here. And you kind of require a specific playstyle for this to be good, because if you're not finishing something, there's no like stowed effect or anything, right? So you're basically just running without a set bonus until you decide to finish or something. However, the 4-piece set bonus, which has recently been fixed, I remember there was a big hubbub about this set bonus because it literally made you take 90% more damage when it had full stacks. So they fixed this, and now the way it works is when you have full stacks, you get up to 15% DR. From what I've been told, this stacks very quickly, even though it doesn't sound like it does. Every single damage instance gives you 1 stack, kills give you 20 to 35, finishers give you 60 to 90, depending on the rank of enemy, and you get up to a 999 stacks. Shooting something 999 times sounds like a lot, but from what I've been told in practice, this basically is permanently up all the time. So having permanent 15% DR reminds me of the Crota 4-piece set bonus, which I believe is occupying the same tier, so it kind of makes sense. And the cooldown reduction at max stacks, from what I've been told, is similar to Empowering Rift. So Empowering Rift, for those of you that don't know, if you already have a ton of additive bonuses to your ability regen, Empowering Rift is like a very small amount on top of that. However, if you don't have any sort of cooldown reduction on your build, it is semi-noticeable. It is semi-noticeable at max stacks when it converts into power. Now, yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say. It's a consistent DR source. The 2-piece is not the greatest. I mean, I guess you're incentivized to finisher to build up your stacks fast, but yeah, it's not necessarily the greatest. It's just like a consistent option that doesn't really have a high ceiling, and it's kind of tied to a 4-piece set bonus as well. Of course, you can get fairly consistent DR off of 2-piece set bonuses as well, which is why this is not S tier. But I heard a lot of people say this is like super consistent, super brain off set bonus to use, and so I placed it in the same tier as Crota, which is kind of in a similar category in my opinion. Okay, next up we have Neomuna, or Thunderhead, which is a pretty cool set bonus family name. The 2-piece is called License to Thrill. Pretty cool. Every time you activate your grenade or activate nanotech tracer missiles, so basically just activate your grenade, you will get a stack, and this stack lasts 15 seconds, and you'll get 12 to 30% melee DR, scaling up at 10 stacks. So at 10 stacks, you'll get 30% melee DR. Melee just refers to any damage that you take within 5 meters. Now, this is basically perfect for grapple melee. Now, unfortunately, grapple melee did get, taken out behind the barn during this patch, but if you were to grapple melee or run some sort of grapple melee build, this would give you essentially 30% DR if you have some sort of navigator, grapple tangle and you are grappling constantly. You'll have 30% DR all the time for boss stomps or anything that's just like near you, which is generally the range that you're taking damage from when you are grapple meleeing things. So pretty good. I put in the B tier. It's obviously very niche in terms of what build it's good for, but the effect is, 30% DR from a 2-piece set bonus is very good. So, I have no problem with putting it in the B tier. The 4-piece is a little bit more niche because it's ability focused, right? On a lot of grapple melee set bonuses where you're trying to keep yourself alive, you'd rather have probably just like 2 DR set bonuses instead of trying to get your grapple back. But in case you do want to get your grapple back specifically and you don't need the extra DR, this is kind of perfect for that too, because every kill that you have on an unraveled enemy, which grapple melee naturally unravels enemies, gives you some grenade energy back. And so if you don't have a navigator point and you're just running around and grapple meleeing things, this will just naturally give you grenade energy back just from grapple meleeing and killing things near the stuff that you grapple melee. And if you happen to have your grenade full when you get a kill on an unraveled enemy, you will get special ammo progress instead. But I think the grenade energy is the stronger effect here, even though, free special ammo is kind of nice anyway. A lot of the time on stuff like Priz Hunter, for example, you're usually using your grapple, right? So you're usually not going to be getting kills on unraveled enemies, especially if your grenade is already full. So not too bad, but definitely a little niche, and I can definitely see an argument for taking a different 2-piece on top of License to Thrill instead of taking Lethal Weave and completing the set. Next up, we have Spire. A lot of people have been talking about this one. I will say the 4-piece is obviously correctly rated by a lot of people. I think the 2-piece is actually quite underrated though. So Old Martian Diplomacy, the 2-piece for Spire, the way it works is every time you kill an orange bar, when you stow your weapon, you get a 40 HP pulse, and you also get a 12 meter. 12 is a lot, right? If you've seen the splash effects that we've been talking about, 12 is a big radius around you to blind enemies. As a small 2-second internal cooldown, but you're not really killing orange bars that often anyway. And so it's basically like duality 4-piece in that like you swap your weapons and you get a little bit of healing, except for it exchanges the large amount of healing you get for a Disorient Pulse instead, which I'd say is decent. And it's a 2-piece instead of a 4-piece. So I could see people maybe combining this with like another 2-piece set bonus, or if you for some reason are still on your Spire set bonus during damage and you like bring it into mechs a little bit. This is honestly not bad, right? It's not bad. I think you would be kind of hard pressed to find a reason to run it outside of the meta 2-piece set bonuses, but it's definitely not terrible. It's like a good set bonus to be running underneath the Spire 4-piece if for some reason like there's not swap or something and you need to run High Noon for mechs or something. It's definitely not bad. Next we have Spire 4-piece. Very, very simple. Just do precision damage. Apparently shooting an enemy with impact damage in the crit, as long as it is hitting the crit directly, will also count as precision damage for this, even if you're not shooting a crit weapon. So it's basically just a free damage bonus for all of the meta stuff in the game right now, besides like Truth, I guess. And yeah, there's no other set bonus in this game that just boosts boss damage this much. So yeah, free 7% damage for a short amount of time, and you're just swapping weapons, which you are a lot of the time when you're playing endgame content anyway. So yeah, free damage. This is ranked pretty highly in the S tier for that reason. All right, next we have Triumphal Anthem, which I think is the standard Crucible set bonus this season. We have the 2-piece first, which is called Scoot to Loot. And the way this works is when you slide, it picks up ammo within 15 meters and gives you a reload and handling boost. Now, originally I was like, this is basically just Gravity Well. I don't know why you would not just use Gravity Well, but maybe some people don't have Gravity Well weapons from Right of the 9, or they just, you know, their loadout just doesn't permit them to run Gravity Well for whatever reason. You can just run a Scoot to Loot set bonus piece, and it pairs nicely with Pantheos, for example, in solos. You can just slide, and I'm sure it picks up ammo, you know, behind objects and like underneath stuff. So if you ever need to pick up ammo that happens to be clipped in a wall or like out of bounds or something, you can use this. So yeah, Scoot to Loot, pretty decent, not amazing or anything, but certainly better than the stuff in the D tier. So I'll give it a C tier. And then of course we have the other half of Triumphal Anthem, which is Shoot to Scoot, the 4-piece set bonus. Now technically this is survivability. You know, you get a bit of an increased slide distance, which is kind of whatever, but you get resist times 4 while you're sliding. Now, you know, generally when you're in danger in this game, you're not like sliding, you're kind of like strafing and shooting things. So this is not the greatest. I mean, 50% DR is a lot, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't linger at all. It is only while you're sliding. And so unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give it a D tier. It is technically positive and definitely noticeable, but I don't know why you would ever take this over like a standard DR set bonus that does not require you to slide. Next we have in the C tier, the Throne Ward Armor, aka Veritas. We have the 2-piece, which is Lucent Transmutation. Someone messaged me recently and said this has a small cooldown, which thank you for that correction. The trigger is a finisher or 2 spaced powered melee kills. So if you Consecration and Add Wave, you're not going to get this to trigger instantly. You need to kill the enemy slightly spaced out. I think it's like 1 or 2 seconds or so, which is totally fine, right? If you're running like Combination Blow, for example, you'll probably trigger this 2 kills in a row if you do like Punch, Dodge, Punch. This will generate an elemental pickup based on your light subclass. So this only works on light subclasses or prismatic with light super, fire sprites, void breaches, and ionic traces. From what I've been told, fire sprites and void breaches initiate their global cooldown when you pick these up, so they're not a separate cooldown from the global timer. Ionic traces don't, but I don't think ionic traces have the same timer. I don't know. I'm not really an expert on the mono subclasses and their global cooldown. So if someone has more info, maybe you can leave it in the comments. And apparently there is a 5-second internal cooldown globally on this effect in general. So if you finish your 2 enemies back to back, you can't make like 2 ionic traces right away. Now I can see this being kind of useful on like mono solar with like Mercy, or maybe on like mono void with Starvation. A decent way of guaranteeing that you get Devour or Restoration off of a finisher. So yeah, not the worst, I would say. And of course, if you are not relying on finishers and you're just using powered melee kills in general, any sort of build like Roaring Flames or Knockout or Throwing Hammer or Knife Trick or whatever you're using, any sort of refreshable powered melee kill build will be able to have slightly higher ability uptime, because no matter what subclass you're on, these elemental pickups still give you some ability energy back. So it's a little bit of ability regen regardless of what you're doing, but it's a little niche, and the cooldown makes it so that it's not as spammable. It's just a little niche. I don't think you would ever really take it for the most part, but it's definitely better than the D tier stuff. Next, we have the 4-piece set bonus from the same family called Lucent Tithes, And the way this works is off of an Elite Plus finisher, so an Orange Bar Plus finisher, you get 50 HP and 3 Void Moths that can give you 22.5 Void Overshield to you and also your allies, so not just you. Unfortunately, when you're comparing this to the 4-piece set bonus, for example, from Ron, where every Elite Plus finisher gives you Devour, I think that's obviously a better effect. However, the effective HP you gain from 3 Void Moths is pretty good, and you can argue that Lucent Transmutation is a better effect than the Nezarec 2-piece. So yeah, I do think this is a little bit more niche, and Devour is just such a universal effect that obviously lingers far beyond when you finish her, versus this Void Overshield, which is kind of like a one-time thing after you finish her. So again, like I say in the description here, not the best reward for an Elite Plus finisher compared to other set bonuses, but don't knock the Void Overshield, right? Void Overshield has a lot of DR, which makes it so that the effective HP gain, like I mentioned here, is very, very solid. So yeah, C tier. I don't think you'd ever really run this over some other stuff, but certainly not that bad. We're down to our last 2 set bonuses, so let's just get through them. The first one is Wildwood from EDZ. The 2-piece is going to be called Watchtower, and the way this works is every time you get a crit kill while ADS, until you end ADSing, you get 2 times generic damage resist non-stackable for a 25% amount of DR. Not really practical in most PvE scenarios. I would say most of the time you're not really hard scoping in PvE outside of like Whisper damage, and even Whisper damage, you're not going to like get a kill with Whisper and then start doing damage so that you have 25% DR during damage. I think that's just like a little silly. It's certainly like a noticeable effect that exists and can be helpful, but I just don't think you would ever run this over like a standard 2-piece set that doesn't require you to hard scope. Next, we have the 4-piece set bonus from this family, which is called Field Expertise. And the way that this one works is every crit kill that you get while ADS can give you a stack up to 5. And at max stacks, you will do 10% extra non-boss damage for 15 seconds. And if you get a body kill while ADS, this ends immediately. So unfortunately, 10% is almost unnoticeable for non-boss targets. Like I mentioned on the Pantheos Resplendent 4-piece set bonus, like doing more damage to red bars is like, unless it's like a very significant amount or you're getting the effect basically for free, this is, yeah, getting 5 kills for 10% is just terrible input versus output. So we're just going to slap this thing in the D tier, and we're going to move on to our final set bonus, the controversial one that got disabled due to its bug Tangle damage scaler. But let's briefly talk about it. So we have Grasp of Avarice, Yearning Echo. The 2-piece is called Untold Greed. And the way that this works is every time you pick up ammo, an orb, an elemental pickup, or break a tangle, you get 1 stack. And this goes up to 100 stacks. Now you get up to 20% DR at max stacks and some amount of reload. And every time you have your shields break, you lose 10 stacks. Now the problem with this set bonus is that the DR is actually not bad. Like once you reach like 10 stacks or so, I think you're close to maximum DR. I think it falls off very heavily. Either that or you just reach max DR at 10 stacks. If you have just 1 stack, the DR is basically non-existent. The problem I have with this is that the likelihood of you reaching 10 stacks without breaking your shield even once, so you have to pick up 10 orbs or, pick up ammo or something like that. Unless you are printing orbs everywhere all the time, you're just going to be at a deficit when it comes to stacks during any sort of endgame content, right? The fact that you have to pick up 10 orbs or bricks and then somehow not lose your shield during this entire time, and the second you lose your shield, you lose all of your DR unless you somehow had more than 10 stacks, right? So unless you are playing like very perfectly, you are not going to be able to keep this DR up for long. And even if you are keeping this DR up all the time, this is not even that competitive with the other 2-piece set bonuses that exist in this category. Like think about just SE 2-piece. That's 25% DR, and that's almost 100% uptime depending on the encounter. So I have to kind of give this a C tier. It's not that good. It's certainly better than the D tier stuff, which I think is like definitely worse on average, but definitely not that great either. Finally, the last set bonus we're going to talk about is Overflowing Coffers, which you may have seen the clip that I posted on Twitter of the tangles that I threw with Rolling Maelstrom doing 1 million billion damage. This 4-piece set bonus, that part of it is disabled. I'm going to assume that they are probably going to lower the cap on the tangle damage and make it so that it actually scales properly with max stacks and you don't just need 1 stack to get the maximum amount of tangle damage. But let's just ignore the tangle damage part for now because that's probably not going to be meta regardless. And the way that this works is you get more ability energy. I think it's both super and normal ability energy every time you pick up an orb or an elemental pickup, as long as you have at least 1 stack of Untold Greed, which is not bad because it's very easy to always have at least 1 stack of Untold Greed. And I think this is going to be potentially useful in maybe some speedruns or optimized encounters where people are trying to get their supers back very quickly during an encounter, so they can maybe have like 2 goldies or something like that. And then you can pair this with like Star Eaters, for example, on Hunter, and potentially get your super back faster. The other thing that this does is if you have 10 stacks or more and you have your shield get broken, it will consume all of your stacks and then make, I believe it's 4 large orbs that just get sent flying in every direction near you. I tried to do this like in an enclosed space near a wall, and I think the orbs actually just clip through the wall. So this is like a little bit annoying, but maybe in a more controlled environment, if you're like looking to just generate as many orbs as possible to give people supers, this could potentially see some use, but I think it's definitely very, very niche. The effect is definitely quite unique, right? You're not going to find this effect of getting additional super energy on orb pickup and just like making orbs on critical health without having to do any damage. That's definitely a unique effect, so I'll give it B tier, but it's certainly very, very niche. Yeah, very, very, very limited in use case. Okay, so that is it for our alphabetical walkthrough of every single set bonus in the game, at least the new ones. And now we're going to go over a brief tier overview as I sort all of them by rank. I'm mostly going to be focusing on the stuff that didn't come out this season because I obviously didn't talk about those because I only went through the new ones. As you can see, our S tier is completely chock full of only new set bonuses. So yes, there is some level of power creep here, but to be fair, there are more set bonuses. There are over double the amount of set bonuses in the game now than there were before the patch. So naturally, a lot of them are going to be good. Smoke Jumper, I've moved down to the top of A tier just because I do think that it is a little build dependent. Obviously, the DR got nerfed from 50% decaying to 40%, which is a little bit of a nerf, not super noticeable, but constantly picking up orbs every like 3 seconds is not something that every build in the game can do unless you run like an Attrition Orbs SMG. And so I think stuff like the SE 2-piece or like the KF 2-piece or some of these other 4 pieces are like really, really meta defining, whereas Smoke is like the top of just being like a consistent option, just a consistent pick. I've also moved Ion Adapter down here, which, because it's only splash DR. And of course, we have SE 2-piece, which kind of eclipses this amount of DR. It's more DR and not just splash. We have Sage Protector 2-piece, which is specifically for sword damage stuff. You can use this for neutral builds if you use like Ergo or like Lightsaber or something for just getting your abilities back faster. This created an entire damage strategy of nade spamming just completely by itself, like the whole Unravel Bolt Charge, Barricade Storm's Keep thing, where you use caster frames in order to trigger Bolt Charge as quickly as possible and then get your class ability back faster and spam nades. Like that entire strategy was enabled by Sage Protector 2-piece, and so I kind of have to give it some props here, even though it is going to be at the bottom of A tier, because I think that strategy in general is kind of eclipsed by a lot of stuff in the damage meta right now that just happens to be stronger and also easier to use. We have a couple other options here. I think Iron Panoply 4-piece I rated a little low last time. If you're using a low, like nerfed ammo gen weapon like a Rocket Pulse or Choir, I think Iron Panoply's additional 35 ammo gen is actually quite noticeable. And if you abuse the fact that you can intentionally get yourself to critical HP and then just repeatedly kill stuff every 7 seconds, you can keep up 15% DR pretty consistently. It is low range DR, so it's only within 15 meters, but the majority of damage that you take in this game, outside of like very long distance snipers, tends to be from within 15 meters anyway. So this is basically the equivalent of like the Shattered Throne 4-piece, except for it gives you ammo gen, and it's a little bit annoying to upkeep the DR compared to just normal. So yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more like effort to play into it, but it's certainly not bad. And I think the top of the B tier is a really good place for this set bonus. We have Swordmaster 4-piece, which is again like a super specific playstyle, but a very, very strong effect. I'm going to talk only about a couple more of these before we move on, or else this video is going to be way too long. Pharaoh. Pharaoh used to be maybe an S or maybe an A tier. I'm not sure where it was before, but Ferropotent, after doing a little bit more, sitting with it, playing with it, and analyzing it, I definitely overrated a lot, and I think a lot of other people also overrated this very heavily. The way Pharaoh works is that only once per full heal can you get this DR effect, and it's only 10% DR, right? So the whole idea with Pharaoh that people were touting is that this thing is up all the time. It is not. It is not. If you ever take chip damage, so let's say you activate Pharaoh, you get the DR, and if you ever take chip damage during this period, and you don't ever fully heal your health bar, which again, there's a lot of encounters in this game where you don't fully heal your health bar because you're taking chip all the time. If you never fully heal your health bar, you can never trigger this effect again until you do so, which is not good. I don't really think I need to tell you it's not good. There are other 2-piece set bonuses that are far better and more consistent than this, even if you are not getting spammed with orbs. So I think it's okay. It's decent. I personally don't see myself really running this in the future, but it's certainly decent. It's certainly decent. And so I put it into the B tier. We have TechSec 4-piece. That's the classic. Twofold Crown. Now that Kinetic Synthesis is a permanent mainstay, a lot of people were like, hey, yo, Aegis, why don't you put Twofold Crown higher? Because Kinetic Synthesis is really good. I was like, I don't rate things based on artifact. Now that the artifact is permanent, I have no problem with putting this in the B tier. Very, very strong effect for survivability during damage if you're doing close range with Kinetic Synthesis. Basically just keeps you alive perma. The only problem with this is, of course, you need to be very close range or shoot till hitting the bricks. But I can see this being very good. You can even use this like during damage. If you're doing like a solo damage, for example, and you're just shoot-to-looting bricks during damage, 70 HP is a lot. This is a big chunk, maybe the biggest chunk that you can receive outside of like Duality or like Vow 4-piece, that you can just actively receive during damage. So pretty good for that. You have Exhaust, which is bugged on Swordmaster on Balestra. Power Loader is like a niche option for orb spamming for, just special dumping with like Horseman or Lord of Wolves or like Still Hunt. There have been strategies that have been designed around those weapons in the past with just spamming orbs and Power Loader. We have a couple other options here. These are all just like sustain options that are relatively similar in power. Bushido, Vigilant Watch, Please Herd. These are all kind of fairly similar in strength in my opinion. I don't really think I need to talk about too much of the stuff in the C tier, besides maybe Superluminal Motion, which got a buff recently. It used to be, I believe, 15 HP per second. Now it's 30. I don't think this is like necessarily meta-defining, especially given how bad the 2-piece set bonus is that you're forced to run with this. So yeah, I mean, it's all right. I don't really think the buff really moved this. Maybe it would have been in D tier before the buff. I think after the buff, it's like okay. It's not super noticeable. Like maybe you'd run it on well in like a really, really hard to survive damage phase, but outside of that, not that great in my opinion. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the tier overview, just covering a couple options that might have moved down or up since last season on some of the older set bonuses. And now I'm going to talk about what I think are the best pairings in D2 right now in this Monument of Triumph update with all the new set bonuses. So I'm going to drag my notepad up here. This is what we've done so far. Let's talk about the best pairings for stuff. So first for damage, I think Vogue and Spire are the two, the top two. The first one is going to be just because Orb Gen is great, can power Still Hunt engines, potentially give yourself an extra super. Like I said earlier, if you have Argent Quiver and you're eating orbs all the time, running 4-piece Vogue on everybody is just free orbs all the time, and they drop at your feet. Super convenient. Spire, I'm sure like everyone knows about this already. I don't need to tell you why this is good. Attrition Orb Sword DPS. This is like an interesting one for like the caster frame thing I was mentioning. You would run EQ 2-piece, so Sage Protector, and then you would run Smoke for Attrition Orb pickups, or you would run Swordmaster for exhausting the boss, or you'd run Neomuna because you're spamming nades and you just want melee range DR, because the whole like attrition caster thing was to spam nades, right, with Sage Protector. Kinetic Synthesis stuff, you could run Pantheon plus twofold. Pantheon allows you to get armor charge off of the bricks that are dropping from Kinetic Synthesis, and of course twofold heals you during damage as well. So if there's ever like a close range Kinetic Synthesis damage meta, you could use this. You have, this is Last Discipline plus Last Discipline, so Power Loader set. Like I mentioned earlier, any sort of non-kinetic brick spam strat involving special weapons like Still Hunt or like Fourth Horseman or something like that, you can use Power Loader for that if your entire team is on board with it. I don't think this is ever really going to become relevant again, given how the damage meta has shaped up, but this is a thing that does exist. Next, we're going to talk about some roam options. First, we have our core roam options. Right now, while King's Fall set is broken, I'm going to recommend these three. 4-piece King's Fall, extremely broken ammo gen. You get invisibility, which instantly breaks enemy tracking, stored exactly for when you need it. I think 4-piece King's Fall is really, really great, a little bit underrated. KF plus SC, a lot of people have been repping this one. On some classes that you don't really need invisibility as much with a lot of orange bars, this is basically a ton of ammo plus a ton of DR all the time. So really, really good. KF plus Smoke is really good if you're on Getaway or if you're on Combination Blow Hunter or Throwing Hammer Titan, where you have constant access to orbs and maybe there's not as many orange bars, or maybe you're running like an Attrition Orb SMG, very, very good neutral as well. And this is for like a post-KF era. So if KF gets nuked, I think SE plus Adapter is pretty good. That's like double DR. You get the Splash DR, and then you also get some DR from the Elite Plus presence from killing the orange bars. I think Ness's 4-piece is super underrated. I think a lot of people are catching on now that I've been shilling this for a long time now, but I think a lot of people are catching on. This is really, really good. I think it's the best general DR setup that doesn't require any thinking at all. A lot of people are praising, Shattered Throne and Crota 4-piece for the same reasons, but I think this has a higher ceiling and is easier to maintain in some cases as well. So Nessus is super, super good. You have the Prophecy 4-piece, which if you're willing to play a little more actively and alternate your weapons, has the strongest ability regen plus DR combination in the game of any set bonus family. And then finally, we have Europa as a KF substitute. So I mentioned earlier in this video, you might want to skip back to the Europa set bonus area, the timestamp if you're curious. But Europa 2-piece set bonus, if it doesn't get patched as well, because I assume it's also bugged. Bungie said they're not going to prioritize patching stuff unless it like critically affects the game. And this is not really critically affecting the game in my opinion. So if you want like an ammo gen sort of set bonus if KF gets nuked into the ground, you could explore and replace Europa with a lot of these, except for this KF one, obviously. So like Europa plus SE, Europa plus Smoke, etc. For a melee build, I think DSC plus Smoke is crazy, right? Most melee builds, they all rely on spamming powered melees.
except for glaive melee builds, I suppose. And so you're going to be able to proc heavy-handed over and over and over and make a lot of orbs. And every single power melee kill, you have a blinding splash effect all over you, which is amazing, right? DSC plus Crota, if you want something with a little less DR, but like a little bit more explosions, you could run something like this. DSC plus Neomuna, this is specifically for grapple melee in particular. Every time you grapple melee kill something, everything near it gets blinded. And of course, as you grapple melee more and more, you build up DR. And then finally, Neomuna plus Neomuna, like I mentioned earlier, the 4-piece. You don't get the blinding effect, but you still have the DR, and also you get some grapple regeneration if you're not using something like Navigator, or you prefer to grapple melee more often. Roaming alternatives. So this is stuff that I thought was worth mentioning, but isn't really going to be mentioned in the same breath as like the core stuff. So Duality 4-piece, I think, is potentially has the highest survivability in really, really hard content where you're taking a lot of damage constantly, and it scales up as combat gets worse and worse. Unfortunately, in this game, there's not a lot of stuff right now where the combat is so bad, maybe outside of certain solos, where you'd really want to use this. But it really depends. I just want to say that I want to put it on the table as like an option for people to think about, even though it's not necessarily like the most relevant or most prominent one. You have Shattered Throne, which is basically perma 15% DR with some ability cooldown reduction. It's basically like a less brainy version of like Prof 4-piece or like Nessus 4-piece. I think it is worse than those in my opinion, but a lot of people do like this because it is super brain off, like you don't need to think about it at all. And of course it does give you some ability cooldown reduction as well. You have Crota 4-piece, which is like, you could run it for melee, I guess. You could technically run like Crota instead of running like DSC Crota. It gives you essentially perma 25% DR as long as you don't leave combat. So in encounters where you're taking a lot of chip damage, this is a good way to just keep up DR all the time without getting any kills. These two are definitely like very good if you're like more passive in an encounter for whatever reason. I mean, I guess this one requires you to get kills, but like after a while, you don't need to anymore. You have Iron Panoply. So this is the one that I mentioned earlier, the Iron Banner set. It's purely ammo gen stat instead of additive. This is like an alternative when KF gets nuked or when other stuff gets nuked. This is like another ammo gen option that is unlikely to be touched. And again, you can have basically perma 15% DR as long as you can play around it a little bit. You just need to get critical once and kill something every 7 seconds after that, which is decent. And then you have SC plus SC, which is, you know, if the exhaust wasn't bugged, it would be definitely better. I don't think you would really run this over something like SC plus KF or like SC plus Adapter or SC plus Europa, but this is certainly an option. Like the exhaust explosion, I wish the radius was like a little larger, but it's certainly not bad, especially if you're playing at longer ranges, in my opinion. And then finally, our last two categories, we have Roam Specialist. This is for all you people out there that just love really specific builds that are maybe not necessarily meta. You have Last Wish 4-piece, which if you ever want to put a getaway warlock in like a thrallway type door and just have them farm ammo using scouts for your entire team, that's pretty good with this. You have Swordmaster 4-piece or adding Sage into the mix. Insane DR with swords or glaives. If you ever need to be insanely defensive during an encounter for whatever reason, you can run a glaive and you can run double Swordmaster or like Swordmaster 4-piece and you're basically unkillable. You have 4-piece Grasp, which I mentioned earlier, is potentially decent for orb maxing in like limited contexts like speeds or optimized encounters. You have Techsec 4-piece, which is basically for glaive melee builds or for kinetic weapon builds like Kvastov or Multimach, or anytime you're encountering maybe like a lot of shielded enemies, might be worth a look. You have Iron Battalion 4-piece, which for Phoenix / super chaining is probably best in slot. There's like no other armor set bonus that really does this. You have Seraph if you are like a stasis player, you know, potentially pretty decent sustain there. 4-piece Luminopotent if you're playing like I mentioned earlier, Verity Arc Warlock or something like that, where you really benefit from ionic traces and you don't mind losing the DR. That's also an option. And then finally, if you're playing like Solar Hunter and you want to like knife trick ignite all the time, you could run 4-piece Pit of Heresy as well. Finally, solo specific stuff that isn't really applicable elsewhere. You know, I mean, I guess King's Fall is applicable everywhere. Maybe I shouldn't have included that. It's not really solo specific. 4-piece Ron, like I mentioned, there's a reason I don't mention it in core or in alternatives here, because I think this is basically just for solos and in more controlled environments. I don't think this is as good. I mean, maybe I could put like, maybe I'd put like Ron plus Ron in the alternative section here. And I would say sections of, or like roles in encounters that have access to easy elite finishers and need sustain and build instead of DR. Right? So like if you're like Priz Hunter and you're like alone in a room and there's like orange bars galore and you're the only one in there, I could see that being usable in 6-man content, but you can see what I mean where like it's like in more isolated environments, this becomes better. Dreaming City plus twofold. This is good for damage survivability in like solo context. For example, like let's say you're not running Spire 4-piece because the damage phase is like very hard to survive or something like that. Maybe you're doing like solo Master Explicator or something on like a non-healing subclass. Then you could run the Dreaming City plus twofold to get the amplified kind of de-aggro or accuracy drop effect. And then you could also run twofold so that whenever you shoot to loot ammo during damage, you get 70 HP on the brick pickup. And then finally, you have Triumphal plus Pantheos, 2-piece. Gravity Well replacement that also guarantees that you get armor charge without having to pick up any orbs. This is super useful from what I've heard for like solo final stands, for example. Like if you're doing solo witness and you want to guarantee that you have surges for final stand, every time you shoot to a looted brick, you're guaranteed to get armor charge. But outside of that, I don't think this is super useful. I mean, I guess Pantheos, you could use it to like chain special finishers a little bit more easily because every time you finish or an ad, you'll get a brick, which then gives you armor charge with stacks on stacks. But besides that, I don't think it's that useful. That is pretty much all I have to say about set bonuses. This video, I think I've been talking for might be 3 hours now. So yeah, really, really long time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed though this content. I spent a lot of time tier listing and testing yesterday. This might be the best tier list that I've ever produced, in my opinion at least. I put the most thought into it, so I really hope you guys enjoy it. I'm trying to do right by the rest of the content that we have on this final update and trying to be as intricate as I can with the tier lists and account for a lot of details that maybe normally I'd pass up, especially given that there's like artifact support and stuff like that this season. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and there's probably going to be a lot of testing before the next video, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed and have a good one.